call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The time is 5:30. Item 2, Board A, Balanced District Scorecard. Dr. Simpson, I'm moving down.
I'm sitting here to be close to that microphone.
Sure.
I was advised to get close to that microphone. This will help me if I say this. My backpack is sitting right there, and so when I leave, if someone could help me. I have walked away and left computers all over the state of Texas this last night, so I'm going to try to remember it. I appreciate the opportunity to be back tonight, and especially in this format. We're seeing this concept, and are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you said come on down, and you meant like go. Okay. I got to go.
I did.
This concept, we're seeing it around the state, is for this to be a strategic roundtable. So I think it's largely symbolic, but I like it. The strategic team and the tactical team leaders kind of get down here face to face and have conversations about strategy. So that's the purpose of tonight. I'm going to remind you all of probably something that I say every single time, and that I'm here when the board, or I guess the team of 8 or team of 7, sneezes, the district gets cold. My wife reminded me of that all the time. When you're on camera and you sneeze, the whole district gets a cold. So what's exciting to me about this is we ask teachers at the front line to do a concept. There's 1,000 names for it, but I'll call it a professional learning community, where we sit around in teams and we look at data and we talk about kids. And tonight I would argue that this is at the highest level in the district a PLC meeting. That's what this is. It's PLC. And back to if the board or team of 8 sneezes, the district gets cold. We're really modeling a PLC. And I'm assuming that you have teachers, I was one, that like to watch board meetings just out of morbid curiosity, if nothing else. But I think a tone for continuous improvement absolutely is and can be and is set by this professional learning community. So that was the first thing, just a thought that kind of came to mind in way of introduction. The second big, I guess, just overarching thought that was on my mind is that the unspoken request can never be met. My dad taught me that when I became a brand new superintendent. He was a school board president in a different district, and he was telling me that as a two-way street. You can't think you told the board something and not have told them, and then expect them to do whatever's on your mind, and vice versa. And so I truly believe that tonight is a calibration between the board and the senior leader team on expectations. That's what this is. And I'm trained to always remind you of the board's role as it's outlined in education code. And this is really confusing to most individuals, and maybe some that drew a name out of a hat tonight. But individual trustees have no authority. They only have authority when they meet as a group in a duly called meeting with a quorum of board members present. I had people all the time say it must be bad to have 7 board members, 7 bosses. And I was like, no, I have one boss, the board. And I for 23 years, I kind of kept that mindset. And so I was responsive to individual trustees, don't get me wrong. But, you know, I felt like I was a broken record for 24 years saying, we'll talk about it at the board meeting when the full board is there. We'll try to reach consensus, or take a vote if that's what it. But anyway, does that make sense that we're anchoring tonight to that concept? And we're going to go pretty quickly because you guys have some stuff, even though it doesn't seem like it right now. But we're going to go pretty quickly, and we're going to keep the decision points pretty simple and pretty succinct here in just a minute when we get to them. The big, you know, decision points are, you know, what, well, I'm going to read them. They're down at the bottom of your agenda. How much data is enough data for the board? And the board needs to reach consensus on how much data is enough data for the board. I think there's approximately 1,100 school districts, and the majority of them have 7 board members. So, you know, there's somewhere close to 8,000 school board members in Texas. And my opinion is that if you asked all 8,000 of them how much data is enough, you would get 8,000 different answers, right?
Yeah.
And that would be natural for that to happen. There's no ill intent or, you know, assumption of negative thought with that. So tonight, we're really trying to take the 6 of you and the senior leader team, and the big overarching question is how much data is enough? You know, like that for the board to perform its statutory requirement of the oversight of management. Clearly, the Texas Education Code believes that board members are not management because you've been charged with the oversight of management. So that by nature gets you out of management. There are some board trainers that just, I know I'm repeating myself, but they just say, here's the line, don't go below the line. Board members ever. There's probably a shade of truth to that. I personally think, and again, I had my dad training me from a very early age as a board president, that if you're not, you can't tell us how to think as a superintendent, but you do need to tell us what we need to think about. That's fair game. You know, as a superintendent, tell us what we need to think about. And that's what this process really is. Your tactical team is, here they sit and they look all calm and relaxed, and if I'm 90 minutes here, they're going to get 50 emails, you know, in those 90 minutes, because there's 1,000 things that are going on. And in the midst of all of that, sometimes it's hard to get clarity about what are the most important things. Like when there's just stuff flying at us, the whirlwind, nonstop. You guys have taken a very, very strong approach, in my opinion, by building a scorecard. Again, back in here, y'all remember chart paper all around the room? It was all whittling down to here's 1,000 things that we could be doing, that these are the 12 to 13, I think, most important things that we should be delivering on. So this is just a logical extension now of that work previous to, okay, the scorecard is built. There are 2 or 3 questions that I think I'm going to tee up for the admin team to get some samples. But the question is back to the board, what does the cadence of this reporting need to look like? How often? Is it during a board meeting and you're sitting up at the dais? Or do we want to come down here and do a strategic roundtable once a whatever, once a quarter, once a year, you know, whatever that winds up being? There are 3, and I think this is in item number 3 in your agenda, if you want to glance at it, but there's 3 big pieces. Just Google why use a scorecard. The majority of the responses are going to say that you need clarity between a strategic objective and a tactical action that lines up to that objective. Well, the scorecard does that, and y'all have got that articulated. Here are the strategic objectives, and here I think they are called key actions. I might tonight say insert the word tactical actions in there. That might resonate. You know, these are key tactical actions. that line up to those strategic objectives. But you've got that structure and you've got that format. The other, and a little bit of what's emerging right now that we're going to talk, there's two other big components. There's three big components to use a scorecard. The second one is getting clarity about the difference between a leading measure, what's the number that we should look at along the way that kind of tells us if we're headed to the outcome we want, lead measure. And then the lagging measure is the measure at the end where we say we hit it or we didn't hit it. So part of the conversation tonight now is to get some clarity about the lead lag. I think we're primarily going to look at lagging measures because if the board and the senior leader team agree to the outcome measure or the lagging measure, then that informs the senior leader team to be able to back up and align leading measures towards that lagging measure, if that makes sense. But if like there's 1,000 lagging measures up in the air right now, and I'm looking at Anthony, there's no way. Like we got to pick just a handful that that this team agrees to. Then, and Anthony, tell me if this is true because it's true of most organizations. You have too much data.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so if we measure things and measure things and measure, and that's true by the way, not just in curriculum. That's true across the board. But I knew it would be in curriculum because that was my background. So the key is what are the most important measures that we should be looking at, and can we draw information from that data? Data itself is and often is and can be confusing, but can we reach a conclusion from it? Well, step one in being able to draw a logical conclusion is to know what the big number is you're trying to hit at the end of the journey. Like that's step one. And then we backwards design and hopefully even narrow down some leading measures because we know what that lagging measure is. So that's the second big component. I would argue that you all are emerging right now in that. So you've kind of got this difference between an objective and an action check. Now we're kind of getting this, we've got to settle on outcome measures so that we can think about leading measures towards that. And then the third big component, which is really the primary purpose of tonight, is what is the cadence of accountability between the board and the senior leader team. Cadence accountability is not my term. That's a Stephen Covey term. But I kind of like it, because we're all accountable for results. So what's our cadence of reporting results as a team, at a strategic roundtable so that we feel like we're on the same page. I made a lot of notes. I don't know that I followed any of them, but we're off if everybody's good with that. So before we jump right into the scorecard, just in way of maybe even warm up, in your packet there is a chart. I see Ms. Grown that's in. The last time you saw this information, it was in a more simple model or graphic information. These two things go together, just so that you know. We're going to dig just a tad deeper tonight by looking at the chart that corresponds to the model. So the concept here, and by the way, this is a board workshop that senior leader team members that are present, I think this is a good time for you to listen to the board as we do this warm-up. And then, frankly, y'all think about a way to think about this at a cabinet meeting later, right? Like tomorrow or whenever, because I think it would be, you're going to get a chance to hear from the board tonight, and y'all might have a different perception when y'all work through it. So we're asking, there's no such thing as a wrong answer. I want to make sure everybody hears me. No wrong, and I'm going to call it an answer. Response, no wrong response from the board of trustees' perception, because we're in a board meeting, and you look at these descriptions of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, now we have a little more of an expanded version of that. And trustees, I'm going to ask for a volunteer, or I'm going to get Deb to draw names out of a hat if no one volunteers. But from your perception, which stage are you in? Like that's the first thing. And I know you're already thinking decimals or halves, and so I'll let you have a decimal. But then, and I think we might have briefly touched on this last time. I want to kind of formalize it just a little bit here. And now that you've had some time to think about it, what stage are you in? And then why are you in that stage and not the next stage? Here's the difference between maybe the last time that I just shared it quickly. I want you to think about the verbiage that's on the chart, not your verbiage, if that makes sense. Like if I perceive that we're at a stage something, I'm going to look at the next stage and say it's those 2 or 3 key words that are keeping us from that stage.
I would offer we're in stage 2, working towards stage 3, and I look at that strategy and quantitative goals are being defined. We haven't really, we've talked about the big rocks, and I know tonight I already saw some of the sheets I was tweeting ahead that we're getting to now that the goals piece where we can say, okay, this is a specific measure that we, the board, those big rocks will see so we can start tracking that accountable piece.
Right, so that puts you in your perception in 2, not in 3. Now look at 3 and tell me, if you don't mind, Mr. Hillier, what's keeping you, like what's the thing that is keeping you out of 3 in your perception?
The last sentence talks about processes, addresses key strategies and goals. So now as we start looking at the data, then the conversation becomes what processes, and obviously that falls back to the day-to-day, are going to be the action items from the staff that comes back to us in that repeatable process so that we can do now that lag follow-up appropriate time, say how long it's going to take to get X, Y, or Z implemented.
Now I'm going to split hairs. Put a decimal point in the 2.
We're at the higher end of the 2. We're not to 3
Okay.
yet, but I mean we're
2.5.
trending towards, we're peaking on the backside of 2, 2.7,
Okay.
2.8, down to 2.10.
Okay, thank you. Any other perceptions? Again, there's no...
So I agree with Mr. Hilliard, and I wasn't present for the initial setup of this process. So some of this is very new to me, but in reading the stage 3 description, when we get to regularly evaluated for improvement, that's where I see we're shy of getting to that step. I have seen some repeatable processes and evaluation in stage 2, but the regular evaluation.
Yeah, it's that stupid word regularly in there that causes the problem, right? Because that's saying you have a system rather than just, an episodic. So thank you.
That was along that line, basically just the factor of time that we've had to do this.
Yeah.
Is that getting to the repeatable pieces that we haven't had enough time to get to that.
To repeat.
And so I
To
think
repeat, that's correct.
To repeat, so it's.
So 2-ish is where you are. You see that the tool set, thank you for looking at, what the purpose of tonight, I believe, is to engineer out of 2 into 3, if that makes sense. And you can't do that without what we're going to talk about tonight, right? There has to be this agreement between what are those final targets, and I think Dr. Micah and some staff members have a few examples to show what it might look like to look at a process also, because this is repeatable process. So how does the board know if there are well-defined repeatable processes? That's part of what tonight is. Did anybody have it in their mind at less than a 2? And so why is that? Why is it not in 1? Everybody's comfortable it's not in 1.
I think because we have done the scorecard over the last 18, 20
You can use a prop with this answer.
Yes, it's in here.
You
So
can't, yeah.
we built there, we're doing the building block, right? We built that foundation. Now we've got to push to mature it to get to that full thing where it's robust. And then back to what Mr. Byer was talking about, repeatable as we have the time.
Yeah.
Once we get everything aligned, now we can start making that repeatable process.
And the scorecard in the district with 100 students looks the same, in my opinion, as one with 50,000. The difference is the time it takes to cascade it out, right? Like that. That's the and it's I said in some board meetings where we have the 4 or 5 administrators, and there would be every administrator in the whole district. Like that literally would be every administrator. So it's real easy to calibrate after the board meeting. Those 4 administrators just stay, and then we have an administrator. this, so I would argue that your journey from 1 to 2 was relatively quick, although Deb is left. I don't know if you all know this, but she and I were given the assignment, and I appreciate it, of going all around the district listening to different groups as we built the basis of this. Dr. Michael reminded me, because every time I turned around, I would say, we've got to jump on a Zoom, we heard some feedback, and we've got to change something, right? And I was smiling every time that they wanted to Zoom, but do you remember some examples of?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Dr. Gibson, the point was when you and I had talked about this really the first time in 2019, right? Versus then once we began this process, what we had discussed or what you had done for the most part was boards did this. And so when we visited, it was important for me that we got buy-in not just from the board, but from our community and from our teachers and from other employees, but all the way through the system. Because to me, it was, and the piece that I think that I recall the most about it was once we did this, well, two things. One is through the process, you had at that time statements, we believe. Right. And our community was like, that is horrible. Get rid of it. We don't like it. And that was through all stakeholder groups, right? Yeah. The other piece, when we did come out with an iteration of it, I think most of you were around then. I was talking about this at the beginning of the year at convocations. Mm-hmm. And one of the counselors sent me an email and said, I like this, but you say the district, and it's our district. And so I came to you all and asked, like, are you okay if we make that change? Because what I saw then, Dr. Gibson, was already the beginning. That was cascading down quite a few levels, right, of people understanding that this is ours and that we're all working towards something. It's not just something that happens at Ramick every day.
Right. And I would offer the other thing that I think it allowed Dr. Mike and the staff, especially number 4, the efficiency and effectiveness, which we believe Dr. Mike is, it gives them that clear, there's a balance there, there's latitude, but it's important that they have to weigh that. Because we all were talking about just the stewardship piece, but they really, not just money, it's all of those resources, balancing time, effort, energy, and the trade-offs that they have to look at to make recommendations to the board. So I think it's been helpful in the process as well to allow the staff to be more focused on, okay, we're getting to a decision. Dr. Mike has mentioned multiple times, they go back to the scorecard and go, okay, where does it fit and how are we going to do it? So I think that's where I think we're really starting to see some positives, and I think it's going to continue to grow from that.
So your journey, thank you, Dr. Mike and Mr. Your journey from 1 to 2, took a little bit, but in my opinion, once you're using the scorecard, you can't take the step back to 1. Mm-hmm. Like that's behind us.
Unless you shelf it.
Unless you shelf it. That's a really good point.
But truly,
right.
if you do it as an effort to just manifest a document, then
which
great.
Does happen.
Correct. But the thing is, and no matter where I go and in this building, and even now with some principals, is they understand we're talking about this work. This work is what's driving all of us every day, and so we're forced into, as Mr. Hilliard said, we're looking at that balanced piece of it, right? And that's what I keep reminding folks is no one priority is more important than the other. It's the balance of these 4 things that we have to find.
And I think about one of the, I'm glad you brought up balance. I can't remember her name, but she knew someone that I knew really well that was on the board the very first training.
Oh, Sandy Winkley.
And she said, I'm here for teachers. And I'm not saying anything. She said that. And if y'all remember, I thought, man, I'm going to get fired on the first night. Because I said, well, that's a fourth of what you're supposed to be here. The student, staff, community, and finances. And she took it well. I played the card that I knew someone that she knew.
Right.
But she accepted that really well. And she said, you're right. I've been seeing this through, but we've got to look at all 4. If y'all remember, y'all modified to the essence on purpose so that it would anchor in our mind that it's all 4 of these perspectives. So that's outstanding. The journey from 2 to 3, is pretty challenging. I ran repeatable cycles of improvement for at least 8 years in 2 districts, and there were times I felt like we had glimpses of stage 4, and they gave me a t-shirt at retirement that we are stage 4, and that probably was true, but this is continuous improvement, and that stage 4 is a high bar. If you read those words, I mean, it is a high bar. So I want you all to get comfortable that from 1 to 2 might be pretty quick because you get the scorecard built. 2 to 3 takes a pretty good lift, and then 3 is like years. That journey in 3 is a long time. And again, I feel like in 8 years down the road, well, I was there 11, but we launched this really officially for 8 years. So those cycles, it took 8 full years of cycles before I could look down at that stage 4 and say, we're probably getting pretty close to that. But anyway, so is everybody comfortable that this is a move from out of 2 into 3? Yes, ma'am.
I think you brought up an important, well, maybe Dr. Mike did. These discussions started in 2019, so it's been a very thoughtful process.
Yes.
And deliberate, and not it's been very well thought out by all stakeholders, and I think that's an important part to
Absolutely.
this. Yeah. So I mean, I remember Dr. Micah, almost from the day he came on as superintendent, that this was a priority.
Yeah, and I hear this term "go slow to go fast," and
One of Anthony's favorite.
Okay.
Well, it's a deliberate process, though, too. It's not, yeah.
Yeah, so I might offer, in this model, it's not slow to go fast, it's slow to go long. Like this is the long game. And so if you take the long game, then it's a lot about the prep to make the thing sustain.
It's like building a strong foundation for something, and that the stronger you build that foundation, the stronger you can build on it. So when he started that foundation to build, then we've all here added on to that foundation.
Correct, and tonight is really, really important in the next 60 minutes, approximately. A nice placement of a clock right there for me to see. I know, and by the way, we'll measure, I'll check in 60 minutes, but at least a 60-minute conversation on some samples of some outcomes. Dr. Micah, I think your team is ready to share some samples of some outcomes. And it makes sense to me to just go through priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And then I'll just be a neutral, objective outsider and interject. You want to just kick off priority 1 then, and they've got some samples in front of them.
Sure. Well, that's what I was going to say and so, full transparency, I stalked Dr. Gibson at TASA midwinter and wrangled him in. I know you wanted out of the exhibit hall. But to have a discussion, because I wanted some input as he's gone around the state. This, and I'm going to say some things, so Dr. Gibson, correct me if I'm making a misstatement, all right?
Okay.
That this document and this process continues to kind of evolve as you see it roll out across state, because you're seeing some best practices elsewhere and you're kind of sharing things around.
Right.
Would that be fair?
That's fair, and one best practice that you all have that I share with others, one that just comes top of mind, is you've got the scorecard one click in on the website. So it's visibility. We've worked for months on scorecards, and I just get on the website and try to find it, and it's like 8 clicks in. And I'm like, that's a lot of work for 8 clicks in, so, and then the fact that you extract out, or at least you did initially, and I think we're going to talk about that tonight, the scorecard reports, and have them as a separate, where they're easily, if I'm a community member, I'm curious, I can just go and click and I can watch the report. That's a best practice to me.
Yeah.
It's transparency, and it is fine.
Yeah. So Dr. Gibson and I sat for, I don't know, hour and a half, and I wanted to kind of unpack some pieces of this. As from the last time he was here, we talked about, we've gone through a year now, it's really a good time to reflect, and so I was picking his brain. And so in your documents, let me see if I can find them. there are 3 examples because one is for 4.1, one is for 2.1, and then there is another one that's very long because it's Mr. Jarrett's. It's okay, Mr. Jarrett, that's the way it rolls. And so what I wanted to do, so I listened to Greg discuss kind of 2 sort of things. Sometimes in the district, we can give you a report. We can give you a quantitative number and say, here you go, right? Other times, though, if you look at the scorecard, I can't hand you something that's a number or a data set because it doesn't exist. We're creating something. So as he was pouring into me, I'm like, okay, so we've got to do a process in some cases, and in some cases we can give you hard data. So what you have in front of you is one example. So the one that says data sources and 5-year planning for scorecard update is the quantitative look at how it could look. Notice that I say could. This is not what I'm about to do unless we can all, or you all can agree to it, right? The other piece, and I'll just use 4.1, while Dan tried to take all the kudos for this, I thank Susie, who really did a good job of it.
It was the mentorship.
But they took Susie took 4.1, right? So there is your, let me make sure so they took the key actions. So this wasn't focused on the tech or the strategic objectives. This was down into that key action tactical level of our district will systematically identify and prioritize facility needs, usage, and efficiencies, right? So it was in there. Well, then if you turn it over, here is the process that Susie and Dan and company are going through that unpacks. Now, as Dr. Gibson and I spoke, you can see in here that there's an estimated time frame because we talked a little bit about these keywords up top: steps, estimated time frame, resources needed, and progress. Because it's an estimated time frame, just like sometimes we've sat in here and there was a sense of urgency to create X, and I'm like, why don't we follow the process? Then the product will be good, right? If we hurry through the process, we're probably not going to get a good product. So we say estimated time frame because look, that's our goal, is to hit that mark. But what Dr. Gibson and I spoke about, so see, prepare new capacity report using updated values. Well, if we didn't have it ready for you by the 20th of May and say if you asked, we would say, actually it's going to be 4 days late, and here's the why. This is what happened as we were constructing it, so that, again, for that oversight component, we're giving you a time frame, but if something happens, because you're literally planning, in this case, for a full year, things happen, stuff changes, all of a sudden you start digging into an issue and realize, well, there's something else here at play that I wasn't aware of. And so now my time frame is off, right? So this is a really good example, and she was the first one that dove deep into it, that shows you that process, the way we could look at the scorecard and give you, for each one of those key actions, here's the process that we're going to follow, right? And so,
Let me, if I might, Dr.
Yeah.
Micah, so I've got the process for 4.1A in my right hand, and I'm looking in the scorecard at 4.1A. You're
Right.
saying this is the process.
correct.
Right there. Are these written in a way for them to be outwardly facing?
Right. So what we talked about, and I visited with Ms. Chancellor, who oversees webpage, is we can then instead, because if we start putting this all in, I'm afraid it's going to get very busy and hard for people to see. So what we can do is, if this is what you all like, is we can put a link in blue to the tactical process.
And that would take you to.
And it would take you, so you would go to the scorecard would still look like this, right? But right under 4.1A, there would be some keywords, tactical process or whatever. You would click on it, and up would appear this page, right? This one here, that you would then be able to be watching and tracking.
I I think it's very good because it's like a progress report. It's one of those things where people want more information, they can get it. It estimates, but it's that people kind of know what the general timeline is. And it's like we get progress reports for kids all the time, right? This
Sure.
is one of those things where people know where the process
Right.
is. So personally, I like that. Keep the big sheet clean, but the ability for folks, they want to understand the specifics of each. I think that's very positive.
And one of the things that, do you mind if I finish?
I don't
You can
mind.
go first.
No, go.
The thing, we're going to deep into it is, one of these, look, I know you're on the board, and you guys know a lot more that's going on because of being on the board, right? Some of this is really about making sure our community knows, because again, what keeps standing out to me is here's a counselor, brand new, first time, and he's like, man, the district just pits us against you. Why isn't it ours? It's ours. We should all be working, right? So to me, this has to also be written, and we talked about it, in language that our community can understand. Because if they go to seek more information and it's in edge-speak, and that doesn't help them. Because I have a great sense of urgency to make sure our community understands it, because we asked them for their input. We said, you guys made the priorities and the objectives, and then we went to the community and said, did we get it right? And then they informed it, right, before we even stopped. So I have this very large sense of urgency to make sure that whatever we produce, that our community grasps it as well.
On to that end, and over this may, I'm just hanging around here. My experience is that as you dig into these processes, they change for the good. It's continuous improvement. Like you get started on this, like, we missed a really important step here. Is it better for the community to see an as-of date on it? Like if later there's an updated version that pops in, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, we can put a timestamp on the bottom.
I don't want to timestamp it, and then if I printed one out because it caught my attention, that's different.
Put a current as of date.
Then I can go back and say, they added, that's wonderful,
Yeah.
that's beautiful, the step they added when they were, that thought just
Yeah.
occurred to me right now.
That's good. We can do that.
Well, it's kind of like our scorecard says last updated, it has the date.
That's
Just put a
right.
little timestamp on it.
Right.
I would be shocked if these processes don't get more robust. And I'm a firm believer in deconstructing. What's the most important stuff, put it on here.
Sure.
Then if you want to build back, make sure that the whole group agrees. Because it could be that, I want to put that stuff in there. I'm not saying here, but it could be that I own that step. So
Right.
I want to see, I'm
Right.
a coordinator or whatever.
Right.
I want to, you're still doing that. This is the district process, and we're trying to help our community
Right.
see what we're doing. So we're not going to jumble it up. You
Well,
just said-
Mr. Jarrett has a word, simplexity.
Yeah.
It's taking, it is, I mean, we talk about it because sometimes we make it so complex because we're so close to the work that unless you're the person that just drafted it, you have no idea what it just says.
That happens all the time.
Correct.
In every organization, education may be at the top of the worst for putting too much, just over-engineering it where you can't make sense of it. These are wonderful. You texted a picture to me, and I was like, I read it, I understand it, it's clear.
Well, and I would go back to what you were talking about, EduSpeak. The summary is important to me too, and that was very well written, the particular one, 4.1, because it's understandable, plain terms that anybody, community member, staff member, parent, anyone looks at it and goes, okay, they're going to look at it efficiently, they kind of understand. Those are all very plain language, easy to understand what we're doing. I think that's important too, because that gives a couple more words than just the key actions. So that summary piece I think is important. I like the phrasing used there in this example.
Is it important to put the word tactical in there, or is key action sufficient for this? I don't,
Sure.
This is just hitting me because the strategy, tactics, that's what we're trying to be clear. So it could be strategic objectives and key tactical actions.
Or do we say board objective and then
I like saying
board objective
objectives.
and then district
And
key
then-
action?
I was going to say that I think tactical doesn't mean
Okay.
Yeah.
get anybody
So
outside of if you're
board
actually discussing.
objectives,
Yeah.
administrative actions. Like if you're just trying to make it like that especially a roadmap, when you've got election coming up, you've got new trustees, that's a line to say that we adopted the objectives and the senior leaders, they run the actions, and then we hear the reports on the actions. I'm thinking out loud here, and that's probably not good, but that just hit me.
So then would you also say, give a qualifier to priorities?
Well, that's board priority.
Well,
But I mean,
District priority.
well, you could bracket across the top, board adopted over those first two columns.
okay.
To me, that, like, the board adopted this.
I think you just should keep it as simple as possible
Well,
because it begins to sound like word salad.
Yeah.
And, frankly, nobody's going to get it. They're going to get
Yeah.
just shut down in the middle of it.
And that's the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish.
Exactly. Because I'm looking at this and I'm looking at all the verbiage and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, great, education, lovely. But now we've just so lost the audience.
Yeah. I'm good, the more I talk, the more I wish I hadn't even brought it up. So just to be perfectly honest.
I do like what you proposed because it does give clear delineation to who is responsible for the actions.
It could just simply say board priorities, board objectives.
See, it's simple, easy, everybody can digest that.
Yeah.
There's no question. Make it easy.
Or trustees, is everybody good with it just saying board priorities, board objectives? You all adopted those.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, to your point a minute ago where you drew like the little bar, and so you put board over both of those, and then you put a district or something for the key actions, progress measures, and out, to show who's responsible. So board's responsible for these two, staff is responsible for these three.
Yep.
So somehow I think you could do what you said, just draw the little thing and say this is board, this is administration or staff or
The other
district or.
option is to put a thick bar down between the objective and key action line, and then or put a note and just say everything to the right is the district staff, just like on here you could do board, thick line, and then it kind of delineation of where the line.
How about, we like this concept of that delineation, and we'll vet it with some community members perhaps to just say what's the best way to tell this. We do that kind of stuff all the time. Is this clear, right? And we'll just let them give us feedback. I do like the delineation, between those two. And again, we're back to the education code. Now, you all, if y'all are at a conference, school board conference, and someone, says, being a smart aleck, and they say, how do you monitor the administrator, because that's what the ed code says. We adopted these, and we get reports on these.
Is there a preference for a word that you all want to use? Is it staff, is it administration, is it?
Staff actions, administrative actions.
I like administrative.
Now, staff just sounds so, but you guys are so much more than staff.
They're almost tactical.
I know, but people won't know
Bad
what
dad
that
jokes
means.
all night long, right?
Administrative, I still think can be a misunderstood term. Something clear where it either says district staff or, to me, the word district, I think, in my opinion, for that side, because we've got board, and then, in my opinion, district or some other word that's very clear so people understand the day-to-day versus the board stuff, which obviously is the very higher level. I don't know what the right word is, but admin to me, I think people might understand who's admin, what's admin, because I was just talking to a constituent, they thought I was in charge of data. I'm like, that's superintendent, I don't do that.
Right. I do kind of like the idea of a bolder line right there, for just as subtle as that is.
Yeah.
Because you could say, see that bold line? I'm to the left.
There's the governance.
Yeah, I'm to
Yeah.
the left of it, and I hear reports of the stuff to the right of it. So
This is what we can do, this is what they can do, this is, yeah.
And the beauty of the
Should.
next thing that we're going to do after this is the reporting mechanism. That's when this side hears the reports on this stuff, right? That's what we're teeing up. What does that look like? Okay, Aubrey, did you get enough from that maybe to try?
Sure.
Okay, we'll play with some words, and it will not be tactical, even though that makes total sense to me.
No, but I do like your suggestion, Dr. Gibson, of asking some folks that are just in our community, right? when you hear that word, what do you think of? Because that's literally how we went through the litmus test of this whole document. So let's go back to the people we're trying to communicate with. Does it make sense?
This is what we're trying
Right.
to say.
Yep.
What's the best way for us to say it? And
Yep.
I think you'll get your answer.
Correct. And when we say that word, who do you think of?
I think that's a
Yeah.
really good way to do it. So, Dr. Micah, then column 3, they've got a couple of examples here. Arguably, the next big lift, you have not stepped on the gas until tonight, is for there to be a hyperlink summary page for everything in column 3. Following that
Version of this format.
Right, you just wanted them to see some samples before. People, I think teams have been starting them, but you were like, wait. Before we
Yeah.
spend hours and hours and hours, so let's make sure that the format's to what the board likes. I think that's prudent.
Correct.
Everybody like the format?
Mhm.
And then these hyperlinks, I'm hearing yes on the hyperlinks. I agree.
Can we make sure that they follow, I like this is a visual thing. The way the stewardship one looks better to me than
Yeah.
the staff one.
I agree.
Just formatting, like make sure they're all the same format.
I think
We bring you 3 offerings this evening.
Well, no,
All right.
Those two.
No, but
those two
look,
are so simple. I
y'all,
thought
really,
they were supposed
this is kind of like when I started writing my dissertation. I brought offerings to my chair, to different examples of my writing, and then he literally told me, this is what I want you to do, so that I wasn't spinning my wheels, doing something that he didn't like. That's really like, I'm bringing you 3 samples. I had them do these so that you could see 3 different sort of looks and say, hey, I like this one, or could we move this one over to there? Like, do what you want with it.
So the next question with that is that, are these workable to the people that have to actually use them?
Yes.
That's the next thing.
These
Does that-
forms,
Does that allow you
Yeah.
to provide the information that you feel is
now,
important?
sure, now understand, so let me clarify something. So let me get to Anthony's, big long one. Okay. So these links that we're talking about are to process standard, or process pieces. When we have data, that's why it looks so different, because it's over here. So think of these like 2 different things. When we can't give you hard data, we're going to create something that looks just like this.
Sure.
But when we can give you data, we'll just list the data here. Now, if it's too much,
Yeah.
we'll create a link to go see this. Because again, I don't want the scorecard to get so deep that you're scrolling to get.
Like the tab, you click the tab and you can dig in if you want.
Yes, or like you can read here's the brief version of the scorecard, and if I want to know more, I click here and then I can go a little deeper down into the hole. But if it can be listed on the scorecard without creating a problem, then we would default to putting the quantitative there.
Sure.
Until, to Mr. Jared's thing here, where it just keeps going on and on and on. Well, because there are so many pieces
And so that was
that we would take to a different
And the
place.
reason I asked the question is because I want to make sure that we're allowing for whatever reporting needs to happen, that if all of this is important, then I want to make sure we're flexible enough to allow that to happen.
Sure.
And not say, well, you have to.
Yeah.
Limit yourself to.
Yeah, so Susie did this one, Mr. Jimenez. I mean, did y'all struggle with?
Not all.
No. And I know you started working on one. I mean, did you find it user-friendly and
The template?
the process? Yeah.
The process, yes.
The template?
I believe it's made in Canva.
Okay,
Yeah, we're gonna convert it.
Okay.
Make
So I
it
couldn't
simple.
use, there was a template.
okay. So then we'll have to, so good point, Mr. Byer, so we'll have to convert it to something that everybody has
Yeah,
that
yeah,
access
we'll-
to,
we'll
that
make
it can.
basic instead of using Canva.
Okay.
So I love the thinking about the community. I'm going to pretend like I'm a brand new staff member to Northeast ISD, and I'm looking at the scorecard, and I see that. I wonder what that means. Now I can see what it means also. It's not, I mean, there's the community aspect, but you want to talk about a very powerful tool for onboarding new employees when you've got this clarity about what the process is. It's right there, just click on, I mean, I could see onboarding scorecard up. If you're curious about what this means, now I'm getting my head wrapped around, I see what we're trying to accomplish here.
I don't know, this one is so clean and simple. I'm leaning heavily to this
The difference,
Yeah, I thought this was just, to me it looks the same, but
The
I,
explanation was that there wasn't a template, so they recreated it
Mhm.
in another form.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
so it just.
Yeah, this one.
Okay,
the one
'cause
that
I'm like,
before
I'm
we did it,
trying to figure out-
They
Yeah.
converted Google, but we're gonna convert it to something
I know,
that
this
everybody
is
can use.
So clean
Okay.
and simple, and it's
Yep.
to the point, and it's not word salad, and it's easy to digest.
Technical glitch.
it just says, does,
but to me
do
this
all
is,
trustees
They are, I mean, but
agree
if
that
you look,
tight,
if you look at how
succinct,
this looks versus
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
this is
simplest
condensed, you have a
explanation.
a
I
longer
think I'm
summary.
hearing consistency. Truthfully, if I'm a senior leader, I'm thinking, okay, good, because I can complex this thing up. You know, like this work is really, to me, it's a good exercise. This is based on the Pareto principle. What we're doing, 80% of the results in any organization come from 20% of the action. So the simpler it is, the more we're crystallizing to the highest leverage action. There's a little side story in that also. And it does take time because you're sitting down and everything's at a meeting and 15 people show up and you pose the question, what's the most important work we do in HR? Well, everybody's coming in with a computer, you know, it would have been 9 3-ring binders back in my day. But the point is, for like Rudy, is like, okay, all that's important. Yes, what's the most important 2 or 3, 4 things we do? And what's the key things that we do? That says key actions. It says key right here, not just actions. It's the key actions. All right, so we agreement on which format you like the best, and it can easily be put to that, and then keep it tight, succinct, which I think there'll be. It'll take a little bit more time in the meeting, but in the end will be better for the staff to have it tightened up. Now, the other big rock for tonight was two things real quickly. One is maybe look at Anthony's data and talk a little bit about that. And then we need to wrap up with how often does the board want to hear a report? Is it from the podium and a dais and a PowerPoint, or do you want to come down to here a few times a year for more of like the strategic roundtable and hear the data reports? Do you want to talk about the data first and then move to the structure of the meeting, the reporting meeting? I posed a question on the agenda, how much data is enough?
Sure.
And how much is too much?
Well, I think they kind of go hand in hand, right? I mean, depending on how much we do is how long the presentation is, right? So I'm not sure exactly what you're searching here for me to say, but I mean, ultimately, if you take a look at what Anthony put together, right? That is because when both Anthony and I spoke about this, what I said is really this is TAPR. That's what this is. This is TAPR. This whole piece of students and everything that's linked is really the TAPR report, which happens to be 30-something pages long, right? Like it's very complex and there's a lot in it. But the question, I guess, becomes for you all is, what data do you want to see in it? Because we can literally drown you all in data.
Please don't.
But we can. I can bring in tons of data, or we can, the TAPR is, but just remember the TAPR comes in January. In this case, it was delayed till February. Does that make sense? So it's all hinging on when the state released it. Ms. Landry, did you have something?
Yeah, so we're gonna put on here a link that links us to something like this that's a summary.
That's so I think what I heard is when it becomes a process, we're going to create this.
But if you have the data also,
Mhm.
why not have a secondary link where we could deep dive if we desire?
Mhm.
And have the summary to keep it simple and on top, and then have the secondary, if the data's already been pulled, and you've got the data.
Yeah. But the question becomes, what data is it?
Well, the key, so I'm assuming with Mr. Jarrett's information that some of the key metrics that his department reviews are graduation rates. And I think, is that,
Well, here's what I would ask you to take a look at. So if you hold this one, which is his sample, and hold the scorecard at the same time, all right?
I've got it on my.
Yep. So if you look under long-term outcomes, because when he says 5-year growth plan, that's really what we're talking about is long-term outcomes,
Right.
okay? He just apparently decided that 5-year growth plan seems better.
Change your wording.
Yeah. So I say this for this way, and if you look at these progress measures, all right? So if you look at progress measures, when he says district end of the unit assessment, common formative assessment, targeted instructional, see, that's all a whole bunch of data, and that we're looking at that each year. And really, we're looking at that all the time. It's constantly informing us. These long-term outcomes, then if you take a look at multiple summative assessments, why he says that, because we could look at TAP-R, but we could also look at ACT, SAT, number of AP, the number of dual, like, that's what I mean by we could drown you all in data.
So is 1.1, if we just look at 1.1, is graduation rate, STAR, pass, AP dual on-ramps, IBC certifications, this is proposing that those are, do you want all of those, or?
Look at the objective. The objective
Right.
is the data sources that are identified.
So and Mr. Jarrett, Doctor, you're saying that these are, when you look at that objective, this is where your mind goes to these things.
And I'm saying if he's collecting this data, and this is what success on that objective looks like, then we should know that as well. And if that's something that you've collected and could put, and it doesn't have to be, like this.
Sure.
It could be this separate from this on a
Mhm.
separate link.
Right,
Right.
right. We can make and house it
In your ICE,
so to deep dive in.
you all did ISO training, or maybe I gave it too, but evaluating and improving student outcomes, the formula there is X to Y by Z. Well, you have that. X, in the case of graduation rates, and everybody follow me, track this. So the current is X. Y is 96%. Is everybody following me?
Mhm.
By Z, 27, 28.
Right.
And so when y'all, and that's the best practice. It's part of your required board training, X to Y to Z.
Mhm.
This is clear. Going from 89.4 to 96, by 2028.
The one thing I would say for the second one, generally all for this, but instead of doing all subjects, because we obviously, there's 4 things in Chapter 4 of the Education Code, 4 main subjects. To me, that's a key thing, because we need to understand if they're doing, I mean, the total is good, but do we need more emphasis on reading and language arts, science, social studies, or math would be the one thing of high-level data that as a board, because that's our responsibility is back to Chapter 4 of the Education Code, superior performance in those.
Okay, so here's a
But,
really good example.
but
We
split-
might have been like a really, so is the board needs to reach consensus on is the one, because everything that you just said, Mr. Hilliard, and you're right, roll up into that number. So arguably, you can't make that number get higher unless all the 4 pieces. But does the board want to see the 4 different core curriculum broken out? Right? That's the point for tonight. You give us a great opportunity. Is it only one trustee, or do all trustees want to see the 4 core areas broken out?
Is that
Will you-
part of the Tapper and Star?
I was just going to say, that's where I keep trying to ask my question, you won't let me.
Sorry. You're just the president. This is your meeting. Where's your gavel? Just get your gavel real hard. We'll all get quiet.
We're required to have a TAP-R presentation, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And that data is in the TAP-R report, right? Okay. So that is required, I mean, we're required to sit through that.
You could. Well, no, you are. You have to have a
Probably
public
more than I
hearing.
think you meant.
No,
Have a public hearing, yeah.
but give the example of what you and I were talking about when we look around at other districts that are doing tap R.
Some just say, thank you for being here tonight. Tap R is located on this website.
Oh.
Please go in and review.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Oh.
Because we looked at other board meetings just to see how they're presenting, and some of them are just really just telling the board. "Oh,
Right.
And if you did something like this, you could link the tapper to and star.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the meeting we got, you click on it, because I wanted to see, and then it was able to go down, you can look at grade levels or stuff like that.
But you're queuing up these, is it 4 or 5? Four big things that we're keeping our eye on as trustees, right? Like basically, instead of the 100 that's in the tap R, probably more.
Oh, thousands.
2060.
2060.
Yeah, thousands.
In the tap R.
The other question would be the SAT or PSAT scores, tracking that over time as well, because that's a standardized, normalized test to see on trend how each cohort's doing year over year. I don't know if that's value-added data or not, but that's another thing that.
Let's ask him.
Alignment.
It's norm, so I mean, it always can be relevant in the sense that all kids take it, but it's not, everybody doesn't take it at the same time. So it doesn't give you a holistic perspective of data. That's not what it's going.
There's not one time a year where you're going to say.
You may have seniors take it, you may have juniors take it.
Yeah, the other problem is kids can take it multiple times
I was
too.
thinking lag at the end, so we see as they're leaving, because we see how many college career ready, also at the end as a lag indicator to see over time how they're performing on that norm, because it's a normalized, standardized test versus localized.
Or maybe you could get an average for that graduating class, so you've got 23 to 24, maybe their average is 865, and you can put the average.
Yeah, I mean, just big rock data, just in my opinion, so we can start to track long-term trends, because that is a normative test.
Anthony, is that, do they still report, I'm trying to forget all this stuff, and y'all are, Anthony, the adder of criteria?
Yeah, they still give the criteria.
That might be something that you might want to share with the board, because I remember that I felt like we looked at that, as a way that kind of takes all those wobbles of the different times they take it and all. Do you get this, or they at or above what the criteria that's established for college readiness, basically. And so we sort of just, now one thing, if you're, just know that if you're trying to increase the number of students that are taking it, one of the best ways to make your average go up for at or above criteria is to restrict the amount of kids who take it. Like it's okay, and people do that all the time. It's really good, and only 10% of the kids. I think what I'm hearing here is y'all want to chase both of those. That more kids are taking it, but we're trying to
We
hold
pay for all of our, all kids can have access and take it at least once before they leave.
But
Every time you say those results, you need to say, we try to get everyone to take it.
And see, you're bringing up the same piece of when we look at 7th grade math data versus 8th, because we have an accelerated math piece, that what you tend to see is 7th grade performs less. Well, that's because the kids that are accelerated are all out of that, and they're testing at a different level. So they're counting in a different place. So it may look like you're not performing there when you're actually performing
I'm
well.
not a proponent of overusing asterisks, but an occasionally well-placed asterisk explaining something like that on this, I think is a good idea. When that impacts this big
Yeah,
number.
it's good you say that. I don't know that any of us have ever, that I can think of, have asked that question, because when we look at math, I know we're specifically talking about that, but haven't necessarily thought, okay, there could be a whole set of students that are in
Not even taking it. They're out.
and all we've looked at is like, oh, man, we need to really focus on 7th grade math and not.
But I think that has come up before. He has,
Improvement plan, when we do the district improvement plan, we acknowledge and identify.
So I think whatever that statement is, maybe inside this report. Again, we don't want to overdo that, and then it gets jammed up with a bunch of it. And
Can't you just do two separate, scoring? The ones that are in normal math and the ones that are in the higher math, and then just list them separately instead of, that way we can see.
Miss
says
Villarreal,
asterisk.
that's not how TA works,
Oh.
okay? That is not how they compute that. They don't. That's
Yeah.
just not, could we? We might be able to.
Well, I was just thinking,
but
I just had a,
When it comes out, I mean, the things that are very forward-facing are always what TEA produces. And so, in that, I think, to Dr. Gibson's point is maybe that's where we throw in a well-placed asterisk or something to explain,
Right.
hey, this is the why behind
I
that.
think that's very
Yeah.
appropriate, because it's your scorecard.
Mhm.
You're
And
going
explain to
use
the
some-
community and the
Yep.
staff, because not everyone going to watch board meetings and understand that nuance piece, but that
What?
where the asterisk does that explanation, I think we can do that.
Nobody, not everybody watches board meetings?
Not everybody, Dr. Mike, I think a lot
Some
of
people
people.
have a life.
I haven't seen 57,000 views on a board meeting yet, last time I checked.
Hmm.
Not a bad thing.
And then I wonder too, if even SAT should be asterisk, because as we're
Good.
seeing a decrease in the number of universities
Mhm.
that take
I-
SAT
Yeah.
as a parameter for admittance, then we're gonna have less and less students
That's correct.
taking it. And it
I-
may be relevant right now today, but maybe in a couple of 3 years.
It appears that its relevancy is diminishing.
Exactly.
Right now,
And
we're on a
pretty
trend.
quickly, it
Although a couple,
seems.
Brown and Yale just brought it back.
Yeah, well, I
And
know.
more of them are starting to say,
It's-
we
but
recognize.
I think
that
it's worthy of an asterisk right now, you know, like we're
Mhm.
watching this.
Yeah.
Again, that's the part where it's your scorecard, like
Yeah.
you're communicating, we're watching this trend.
But,
Yes.
but I guess, and just remember what we said, 2,060 data points.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
y'all, that's what I'm saying, like, there's so many data points. What we're trying to focus on is what's most important. Like, what do you value the most so that we can keep an, we're still gonna watch all 2,060. But when we come and speak about it, we're just not gonna talk about 2,060. We're gonna talk about what you wanna hear.
Well, and I
So-
think for the, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I've been taking backseat all day.
Go.
You know,
So, well, what I wanted to ask is, Anthony, since these are the ones you put on here, are these the ones you think are the most important?
Those are all encompassing, all of our students have access to, no matter what school they're at, and no matter what their circumstances are. So at any point in time, every student will be accounted for in TAPR, every student will be accounted for in STAR, every student who takes an advanced course, whether it's AP, dual, or on-ramps, across the board will be accounted for, as well as the industry-based certification. So it's an access point for all kids. It's wide.
Okay.
And I mean, the SAT, PSAT, they do have access to that. It's just, that test is kind of standalone because it's all created through College Board and those aligned to our standard RTs. And so I don't know exactly if that gave the value of what we do compared to what kids are learning.
Are you comfortable with it if you can put an asterisk on
Oh,
it?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the data is data. I mean,
Right.
I think it just needs some explanation.
Yeah.
'Cause you
But
can
do we need
say
it?
nothing.
I guess.
Well, it's a fair question.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, y'all are the content experts on
I will say
this.
yes to SAT because we do SAT school, but
Okay.
I won't necessarily say that's the case with the SAT.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Well, and I think all these, I was gonna suggest that the ones you have listed plus maybe SAT, they're all recognizable to our parents, guardians, community. Anything more than that, I think, and even the TAPR isn't necessarily recognizable to most people. But at least STAR, AP dual credit, IBC, SAT, like those are all things that if I said that to anybody in this district, they're gonna have an idea of what generally that is.
And if I could say, TAPR and STAR was synonymous, but we get our results. Remember, we share with the board our results, how we performed that previous year.
Right.
TAPR is a year in arrear, and so that's why it's put on there in case
Yeah.
you still want that or not. Then the board can just do TAPR.
But,
Can I make a
go ahead.
suggestion? I'm just sitting here looking at the data sources available, and every one of us here knows what TAPR is.
Mhm.
But that might be neat to spell out IBC. I see it on the right side.
Oh, yeah.
Just spell out those things out, because once again, I'm assuming it's
Mhm.
somebody new to the community or a parent looking at our schools wanting to come in, just so that plain language might help
Yep.
just for a couple of those things
Yep.
until they get in here. I see it on the right side here. but we'll put
Or
that
even a
also-
glossary.
Or that might be good too, just to say,
Sure.
here's the acronym.
Because there's so many acronyms.
With this.
If it's a link to a glossary, that would be
That makes-
super easy, but if nothing else, here's a glossary.
So to y'all's point, right, TAPR is pretty complex. How does taking the data that Anthony's highlighted here and making it sort of like, this can all be found in TAPR, but we flesh it out because this is what's important to you all and to us, for a more complete sense of everything, follow this link. And then if you want to go down that hole,
absolutely.
you go on down it. Like, you can go look at 2,060 data points. But we've extracted for you what's the most important.
Well, and the nice thing is after a year or two watching the data, if we decide there's something we want to add or change, then we'll be able to,
Right.
as a
Strategic
board,
roundtable.
discuss and say, is it still giving us the appropriate
Okay.
indicators or not? But these are the big rocks that for us at the high level was
Sure.
to do that monitoring.
And the thing, I'm going to extend on that. So I'm an individual trustee. I've had this thought. I'm just going down, let's say a year from now. I've heard this. I'm thinking there may be an additional measure. Instead, I'm not saying you, Mr. Hilliard, any trustee, instead of asking the superintendent to add it to the scorecard, you're saying, sir, can we put it on our next strategic roundtable as a discussion for the whole group to consider? And you have this.
Because it helps having, obviously, the staff here, because obviously, like in this case, Mr. Jerry can go, yep, I got that, or that's good or not, or the reasons why. So it's very value added in that regard.
Yep.
And at some point, I think we trust this staff to provide the data that we do need in an instance. And we also all have the ability to dig deeper into that data if we need it for our own
Correct.
curiosity or whatever. So I think at some point here, I'm kind of worried about us crossing that line of administrative and board.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And a lot of districts won't do what we're talking about because of that concern. Like, we're asking the board not to get in the weeds, and then here we're giving a report on the weeds. But as long as you keep it at these crystallized high-level data points that we've agreed to me it informs the board. It makes you feel like you know how we're doing.
But Dr. Gibson, so I'm going to, because I know you're dealing with a lot of districts and you can't remember everything that everybody tells you, right? But you and I talked about this years and years ago. It's the one night when we're giving this report to you all. It's the one night to get in the weeds. It's with us.
Right.
I think you've said it the last time. It's a day hike.
Yeah, bring a granola bar
Right.
and a bottle of water,
Yeah.
not an RV.
Correct, because we're not,
Yeah.
we're going to go in, we're going to kind of get in the weeds a little bit for the evening, and then come back out and let folks come back to work, right?
Exactly. That's. I think you just kind of put it exactly what I was trying to say. Day to day, that data's all on y'all, and then that in the weeds night, that's on us.
I mean, if I was a trustee and I'm hearing our scores, and you know, I like the concept of saying, I think you and I've talked about this. Well, that may be true. You know, but,
You might be right.
that might be right.
Howard Baker.
There we go. I was trying to remember.
Yes,
the
sir.
name. That might be right. We have a data report, a quarterly roundtable coming up, and I'll listen for that. Do you see it gives you like, okay, that might be right. We've got a quarterly strategic roundtable coming up. I'm gonna make a note right here in front of you, and I'm gonna kind of listen for that. I'm a community member. I'm like, wow, okay, that's really good. Y'all have what? You know, we do a little deep dive into the data, once a quarter, whatever. I'm teeing up the next question. How often do you want to meet?
Because we're a board that doesn't have the subcommittees that some districts do. I mean, and I know that's kind of a going away thing. So those boards do have the advantage. They may not need roundtables. I think we do, because the ones that have committees, they do dive really deep on a monthly basis, at least, before their monthly board meetings.
It's typically a subsection of the board, the committee, right? Unless in a form. The beauty of this versus that is that the whole, see that what I worry a little bit about is we don't reach consensus as a full board about the data that we want to see.
I see the advantage, exactly.
Meeting,
I see the advantages to the committees, and I also see that there can really be a lack of sharing and a lack of
just robust conversation with us.
This is much better, I think.
Are we ready? Do you have enough on data, Dr.?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I just want to say one thing in reference to the getting too deep in the weeds. We have the objectives, and as staff, y'all know better than we do what those objectives mean and the things that you monitor and look at. And so having a link that we can look so we understand what your thought process is, what those objectives mean to you and how you monitor them without us having to go to Dr. Micah and say, hey, what's this and how do we get that? I think that gives us and the community more transparency into what's going on, and also takes a little bit off y'all if y'all already have the data and you're linking it to the scorecard, because it's what you look at, it's what you know makes these numbers work and makes the measurements improve, then make it available, make it transparent.
Very well said. Okay, 2 of 3 questions are on the road to being answered. The third one is, how often do you want to hear reports? Do you want them in a strategic roundtable format? I think currently you do each priority one time a year, at
Right.
a logical time in the calendar.
Right.
So that could almost be quarterly roundtables. In order, I'm just going to say things that y'all can just forget or dismiss. I said day hike. Is that 15 minutes at a regular board meeting, or is that a 2-hour workshop sitting down the floor like this?
Well, if you're putting links to it, does it need to be a 2-hour meeting? I mean, but then you're depending upon the board. I mean, it's just a report to us. It's not generally action that we're taking on. It's just a report of what that information is. So
It could be argued that it's a value add session. That's not action, but it's just, I'm a trustee and it's a value add. So, I'm listening, and I've got a question, and I heard this in the community. That's usually a little bit more like this, where you set aside 90 minutes or something.
But I'll just tell you, I talked to Dr. Mike about this after the last one we had. Ms. Chancellor did. So really robust presentation, which is good, but it took an hour and 15, which is good. My thought would be at offer for consideration of trustees is that could literally be the full session be recorded and kind of posted so people want the full, and then we get the executive move through the slides. Here's the high points, 15 to 20 minutes, because we'll have already, if we want to do video, whatever the appropriate thing is, that's to be discussed. But that way, because it is important that the community gets it and like the information shared is good. And if someone that wants to sit there, especially if they're not familiar with it, obviously we have a different level of familiarity because it is also important to the community. So there's value added, but not necessarily, especially regular meetings tend to be longer anyways, or either do it as a roundtable special or something. But where we could have the executive summary with the key points. Hey, we want y'all to see this, whether it's whatever the subject, staff, students, whichever one we're doing on, hit the high points, executive level, so in a board meeting context. But the full slide deck and the words behind it could be posted on the website next to the scorecard saying, here's our quarterly update, here's the slides. But if we want to do voiceover, like Mrs. Chancellor did for that one, whoever the appropriate secretary for it is, or just put the slides up and then we just get the executive summary, so that it doesn't always get lost, because some people may not stick with it all the way through. Because I'd say, in my opinion, it ended up being a little bit longer, especially because we had presentation that was bad. So it's good information, but I think the format and how we want to do it as a board maybe need to be discussed further.
but is that double work?
Well, I was going to turn back to you. Like, do you, in your mind, what feels like double work and what feels like we're getting a twofer here? That
Sure.
Because you're going to report to the community, right?
Right. Well,
or you would like to.
I think I'll go back to. I feel a burning desire to report to the community because we keep talking about getting their voice and getting people's voice, and then I don't come report back, right? And I think the struggle for me, and I'll just tell you, is and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. V, but after Ms. Chancellor's presentation, it seemed to me like there were some things in there because I think your words were, if we're doing all these things, why do people not think we're communicating with them? Something to that effect, right? Which made me think, okay, there were some things in there you weren't maybe totally aware of, right? So we're always trying to strike this balance of making sure you all are understanding the work we're doing, and then letting the community know, yeah, we're doing a lot of these things. Maybe you're just not aware, because I think I've said this a lot, and I'll just repeat it again, is, in 95 when I got my bachelor's, I had to sit in a library for weekends trying to find 10 peer-reviewed journals, right? Fast forward to 12 years later when I got my doctorate, I never went in a library. And the skill set I needed wasn't about could I find it, it was how do I categorize everything? Because I could find stuff volume, right?
I crashed a hard drive.
But that's the struggle, right? Is that it's finding this balance, because again, we go to the community, we ask them for their input. They're not as up to speed as you all are. So I feel this need to go back to them and tell them, look, you're paying taxes, you're sending your kids here, you live in our community, you need to know what we're doing in a manner, but I also don't want to take up a bunch of your time. So where's the feel? Where is it?
This is
right?
where I think we can do exactly what we talked about. We talked about this last night. The advocacy locally, where each trustee goes to there with senior staff, and we can highlight key points in each of the 4 parts of the scorecard, obviously directed to the website. But that way we're going back to the community directly in the community, making it accessible to the person. Video recording, we can talk about that. But now we're doing it on a battle rhythm. Once in the fall, say late September, early October after we're in school, but before the holidays, and then late February, March before spring break, and that. But that local advocacy where we're back in the community, each trustee with a senior staff member hitting the highlights, particularly in what we have done, where they can do it in a concise format, but they're getting that, because it is important that we do give feedback to the community, because that's them who we're working for. So I don't know, that's just a different way of doing it, because this thing I thought would be very value added with this.
And I probably I don't think I ever debriefed with you, I didn't. So I'll tell you more. So it's getting team of 8 talking points, aligning with the 4 priorities, basically, so that it doesn't matter which trustee, superintendent can't be there, David, I've got it. It's the same, like here are our highlights of priority 1. Now I'm going to say this every time, don't only hit the points of pride. I think it's really important to tell the community this is something we're working on.
Yeah.
So like here's 3 points of pride and here's a pain point that we're digging in on this.
And giving the plan, say, hey, it's going to be a 2-year process. This is what our target goal is, and this is how we're going to get there. Yeah, absolutely.
But that just common talking point is what we're talking about, wrapped around the scorecard, and then having a systematic way to get out in the community and share those. Did you get enough from that?
Yeah. So. No, not really. Because I need to know, right, like I need to know ultimately what it is, because I guess my thing is if you all don't want a full, robust presentation at a board meeting, then we can get together and figure out a different way to deliver it to the community and still put it there. Then what I think I heard you all say, or at least some of you say, is, look, do that robust type of thing and put it somewhere and give us the Cliff Notes version of it.
At a board meeting.
At a board meeting. Like, we did a community.
Go to your community one if it's less than a quorum? Could they?
Yeah, but I wouldn't be, I mean, here's the problem is, in such a big system,
Right.
I'm going to have a hard time hitting 7 distinct communities, right? So I'm going to have to do it through some type of video.
I was going to say, what about a YouTube that's accessible to anyone and everyone?
Correct. Like it would have to become a part of.
Now I understand what we're talking about. That helped me. We're talking about a video-based community.
Right.
I got you.
Right.
That would be,
Yeah, because
that would be a one-shot. It
Yeah.
could be very in-depth or not,
Sure.
whichever. And a way for community questions to come in after watching it. Whether a dedicated email, info@scorecard.
Right.
So would you do 1 a quarter and do 1 priority, 1 quarter, 1?
Well,
or
again, I'll go back to what we agreed to when we began this, right? Like the agreement was we'll do students in January because TAPR comes in. It made sense. Stewardship made sense at budget because that's when we talk about it. We did staff in like September, October because the year's begun. We know what we have and don't have. And then we did stakeholders in December to just and then it just started again, right? So, to me, that still makes sense with our cadence of how things work, but I'm open to what you all want.
I think that having that, now we've gone through it,
Mhm.
I think that is a good rhythm in having those 4 spread throughout the year. I think that's a good way to do that, and it aligns with sort of the topic of that particular quarter.
How does that
So, yeah.
interplay with the higher level at the board meeting?
Well, I guess that's what,
That's the question.
that's the question. Like, that's what maybe I missed it. I don't.
And on one hand, we're asking them to recap an entire year's worth of
Mhm.
information.
Right.
You know, and so I know that can be challenging. Right. And on the other hand, we want it to be concise and to the
Well,
point.
this,
And
I
so,
mean, this helps, right? Because
Yeah.
you've got new data sets on where we are on this journey.
And-
That's really what it should be.
And I would think most of us, obviously everybody else can speak up, but that having a 20-minute presentation is probably great. And if it starts to get to be 45 minutes or longer, now you're starting to get a little bit, especially with our agendas are usually pretty jammed. And so trying to have where that more minutia can live or exist is probably outside of the board meeting.
Is there a time of the year, don't laugh, that that it's logical, there's not a budget meeting, or maybe you do it in conjunction with a budget meeting, but where there's already an existing workshop that you could just do one strategic roundtable a year, not instead of these other things.
Sure.
In addition to these.
Sure.
That's our time where we're going to run through
Well,
we're going to run through it.
So as you were talking, I was listening. I wonder if this, for consideration, is that prior to the meeting where we give you all a briefing, we've already produced something for our community that's a little more in-depth prior to the meeting. So then if you want to watch it as a trustee, you can, or you don't. And then what we do is then we come, so like in December, or whenever we get our data, we would do it. So maybe TAPR comes in January, so we would do the presentation and then bring TAPR or something. Do you see what I'm saying, Anthony? And saying that way then we've done a community-based kind of an in-depth, and then what we're bringing to you, to the board that evening, is just a synopsis of what we just presented.
That's correct. We can watch it.
Correct. You can go in depth more if you wish, or you don't have to, right? And that way then I think we've covered both sort of gamuts.
I think that whole, the YouTube or the video or the whatever, I think that's a really, in today's society, in today's world, whatever, trying to get together a community meeting, and we saw it when you were trying to.
They don't come.
Yeah.
No one shows
Well,
up.
people have
66,000 people were
busy
directly
lives.
contacted and 13 showed
I mean,
up.
if I lived
So-
here tonight, I would go to YouTube if I was curious about
Well-
something.
And you might watch them in the middle of the night, or,
Sure.
That's right.
when your schedule,
Correct.
when you're, maybe during the day, you're dealing with children and
The
events
beauty
and
of having
life.
the synopsis at the board meeting is in the event that someone came, this is weird, but they came to the board meeting, but they didn't want to watch the YouTube, they're going to hear,
Yeah,
they're
yes,
going to hear
yes,
the high
yes.
level of
The
it.
nice thing about the YouTube too is to be a standalone, not embedded within the board meeting and the 5 other agenda items, so that they can go back and become that historical track record of how we've done it, and it just becomes its own unique thing. People can watch it on their time. So I think that'd be very.
I think in addition to those, I love it, I'm going to just propose one strategic roundtable a year where you really talk about
At least.
key learnings for the year and any changes to
Like
process.
this. I think
Like
this has to
this.
become a regular, we
Like
go through a year, stop, pause, go through this again, and re-go, right? Like,
Especially if processes change dramatically because of learning, that's the time to share it. Like, you remember how this looked
Sure.
like this? Well, we got in there and started peeling the onion back, and it looks, so that was a big learning that occurred during.
Well, it's like Mr. Lee said, it's like, he suggested the SAT, said, I have no idea if that's a valuable data point or not, but let's try.
It might be to someone, yeah.
A year from
Not so
now,
much
around
And
to
we come
someone
back
else, yeah.
here and find out if it actually.
And you can say, we're going to keep it, or we're not going to use it. We've studied it this year. That's a good example.
right, because I can tell you, one is they're about to track military, which they always say CCMR, but they never track military, so now they have a mechanism. We're going to see how well this does. Or you could see things like,
Who are they, the department?
The
or
agency.
they finally
Agency,
figured it-
yes.
Or they think they figured it?
but it's just like when we report on, through how many kids went to college. The only ones we track are in the state. Once they leave, and all of you have gone to SUMAs, you listen to them, most of those kiddos are not coming in state. They're going somewhere around, right? And so those data points, that's why some of that stuff we don't watch as much, because that, says 57%. Well, that doesn't include all the kids that didn't go in state.
It's not a true picture.
It's not a
Correct.
value-added data.
Right. It doesn't help. It's data. It's not.
I'm patient, I know you.
Yeah, I just worry about redundancy because there are some elements that we have to report to the board, so we'll be repeating those things like HB3.
Sure.
We have to do our district review and all of those.
But
data
that's the law,
points.
Anthony.
Right.
We got to do it. I mean,
If we're doing it in the board meeting, then we're going to do another, but it's the same information.
but HB3 goals you don't have to do.
Well,
You got it.
No, in the board meeting, but not in our
Oh,
update. Do you see? Parse them out. We're going to report to the board HB3 goals. We're going to still have to do TAP
Statutory
R.
requirement.
But again, TAP R just might be I like what Dr. Gibson said. Here are the 3 things that we really like in this TAP R report. Here's 3 things we really need to focus on. And there you go. Like we just took 2,060 data points and boiled it down to here are the 6 things. 3 really good things and 3 we got to watch.
And then you could say, and here's where the full report
Right.
resides on our
Exactly.
website.
And if
Because
you
we're
want
not gonna
to
hide
a year in
anything.
review
Yeah,
peek, look at this video because this will
There
give
you
you
go.
the in-depth of what we
Yeah.
were doing in order to get
I
there.
know, Anthony, that over time, we've started saying this is just a compliance report. Because, like, we have to do this report, so we're gonna do it. It's gonna be redundant, but, we have to do this report. Then the scorecard data became what everyone was really interested in. How are we doing on our journey? So I hear what you're saying about the redundancy, but I think just say, this is a required report. We're just doing a required report. And you're gonna see some of this in our scorecard, and some of it maybe not, but it has to be done this way.
Yeah,
We're just gonna do it this way.
I think we can parse it out. I do.
I don't want double work.
Do you have a question?
I don't know if it's a question, but I was going back to what Ms. Landry said earlier about the staff kind of giving you all information that we believe is the most important. And I just want to, part of my concern about giving that, because with staff, there's a ton of information. And so now I'm picking just a few of those pieces, and I like the idea. I just want to make sure that we're going to be able to give you all what you're looking for. I like the idea. What made me feel better is what you said, Dr. Gibson, about if y'all want more, you can find somewhere else that makes me feel better about it. I guess what's going through my head is just making sure that we're talking about what you all want to hear and not just what we think you all want to hear.
Yeah, but I
And
think,
that's why we do the roundtable, right?
right, but
It's so that we can say, okay, I see this is here, but I was really hoping to find this.
sure. Yeah, and I think the thing is, what I heard a lot of you say is, could you get around this piece from that report, right? We bring in some 3 and 3. Here's 3 things that you should be thinking about, like these are good things, and here's 3 things that you should probably be asking, like, what are we doing here, right? To bring them both to you, that way then, so Mr. Jimenez, like if we were bringing in retention, like gosh, we were able to retain 85% of our teachers, 95% of our counselors, and 87% of our administrators, right? But you know what? One we didn't were LSSPs. Do you know we lost 50% of them? And then the question you're going to ask is why? And then we're going to say we don't really know, but that's something that for the next year, like we have to dig into now. Like this was a flashpoint for us to go, what in the world, right? And that way then we're giving you some data that we're watching so that you know what we're seeing on a day-to-day and what we're really attending. Does that make sense?
That's where we have to trust that
Right.
you you're doing this every day.
Right.
We're not. And so we don't know what question to ask until we're presented with the information. And then we say,
Right.
oh, well,
Yeah.
Landry says, oh, well, actually, I was looking for LS, whatever.
Sure.
So,
And if that happens, then we can say, you know what, when we circle back in a year, let's let's take a look at that, right? Like, we'll see if that makes sense to add in, because I like that, then we're in that cadence, right? Of every year we pause, we look, we tweak, and we move on again.
It's almost like it's repeatable.
And the dad jokes are flying tonight.
Look at you.
Does that make sense to everybody then?
Yes.
I don't know, in my perfect world, it's keep it simple.
Right, but that is
Just
pretty
everything
simple.
Very simple.
But that is.
Don't drown us.
Yep. Nope.
Please.
We drown ourselves in data, but what we'll do is we'll boil it down to the three things like, gosh, this is really going well, and the work we've been doing, you can see it. And here we did some work, and it didn't get the results we expected.
I love the term of crystallizing the most important
Yeah.
aspects. And
Yeah.
I learned that from somebody, because I was saying, let's just get it short or something. Let's not just get it short, we're crystallizing.
Mhm.
Like, this is the most important thing.
So did that help?
Yeah, it does. So
I
the only
see
thing,
cabinet members saying it helped also. That's
and so the only thing, so it's going to take, okay, so may I recap real quick, just so I know?
go.
So you're good with these process pieces, right?
Yes.
So we'll start work, I'm looking at heads.
Yes.
Consensus, Dr. Gibson.
This is the way you get it with heads.
Aha. Right, so, okay, so then we'll start working on these process, and we'll create a link. Ms. Chancellor, you and Maisha and those folks can do that, right? And then where it makes sense to do data, we will, but we'll create a link to what we're watching. Then if there's a full report like the TAPR, we'll create in there, and for more, you can, so that way then you can kind of go as deep as you want to go. Is that, am I saying this right?
Well, and I kind of like, Mr. Jarrett has it laid out.
Right,
So these are the data points and these are the sources.
100%. That's exactly what we would do is, here you go, right? But we would take, because again, if you look, if I did this, this would be like 4 pages, 5 pages just on priority 1. We'll take it and house it so that it doesn't become so complex, the file, right? It'll be a click. You'll come over here, you'll see what falls under 1.1. Here's our markers. Then you go to 2, and then it'll keep directing you to the data sources that you want.
I like that a lot, because I'm making the choice to pick where I want to go.
Right.
Right, I'm
And how
picking.
deep you want to go.
That's right, I'm picking it. I'm not going to get there unless I'm going back out and picking where I want to go.
Right.
I think that's
Okay,
important.
just confirm, we're going to do board priorities and board objectives, some sort of thick line as well.
Correct.
And then
We'll-
district or whatever that right term becomes.
Yep.
When
Yep.
I'll figure that out.
Yes, sir.
Same here, board objective on
Yep.
these two.
Yeah, and look, you know, as we're doing it, as you start to watch this happening, because look, tomorrow we'll be able to put up this 4.1 immediately, right? But as you see, if you see something that says, hey, you didn't put board, or you didn't put, just let me know. I mean, as more documents come and stuff, it's just going to be that piece of, oh, okay. Now, the only thing that I want a little bit of clarification on, because Ms. Villarreal, you pointed out this one being so easy. Okay, do we want do we,
This one,
She likes
read this
stewardship.
format here.
okay, you like the stewardship one. I'm
This
sorry,
is
I thought it was this one.
so
Okay, so
simple.
the summary, you all want that little, you want this cover page with the little summary.
This is great, as I tell you.
That's
Okay,
how we
no,
talk to the community.
that's fine.
And explains it.
I just want to make certain, because this one, it's a one, so it's a little bit, and try to use it in plain speak,
Who's this?
English. Susie.
Mr. Villarreal.
Susie's.
Thank
It
you,
is not Mr. Villarreal.
Thank you, Susie.
It's called mentorship.
Yeah,
Dan's mentee, Susie.
but,
Tell her everything she doesn't know.
okay.
2 to 3 sentences. I mean, it's not-
Right, no, but
Yes.
a really short little summary in
Yes.
English that, okay,
And you
that's
all
good.
said as a link, correct?
Mhm.
So like under the board priority, stakeholders, is that where then you can click to this to kind of break it down more?
It would be in column.
No, it'd be in column 3. So when you go to 4.1, so if you go to this page, Aubrey, where it says 4.1A, prepare and review campus utilization capacity report, under the key action,
Okay.
you'd create the hyperlink right there that goes to this.
So if I
Because
want to know what that means.
this is what we're doing,
Got it.
okay? That's it.
And that link would say something like policy or process or,
It'll show this, or it'll show a bunch of data points, and we'll kind of help explain what the data is.
but the link itself
Yeah,
says
yeah.
process.
It'll be process,
Explain what you're looking at.
right.
Yes,
It'll
yes, ma'am.
And then the
click
second,
here.
the data link would say data.
Data.
But this lays it all out. You have your objective, your key
Mhm.
actions, part. I mean, this is so beautiful. I mean, the simplicity is like,
Good.
love it.
It's rare to be that succinct. That's the goal.
Well, she's an accountant.
Yeah.
They're pretty succinct.
Madam President, thank you for allowing me to
Thank-
be here tonight.
Thank you for being here to facilitate.
Good work. Thank you. Really, really good.
Yeah.
I think I'll have more before you go. I don't want to be in the way.
Okay, thank
Nor
you.
do I want to stay.
Oh.
Okay.
Don't forget your backpack.
Thank you. Back.
Yeah, you may leave.
Am I dismissed?
You're dismissed.
Thank
Be,
you.
be safe going home.
Good to see you. Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We're on the journey. We'll get t-shirts that were convocation stage 3 on the way.
Shannon, should we take a 2-minute break?
Yeah, do you want to
That was our funnest past weekend.
put it on break?
Yeah, bye.
Still
Thank
an
you.
active meeting.
Yes, I will.
She's going to gavel us into a recess.
Oh.
Right, because you're still in session.
Yes.
We're going to take a 5-minute break, and the time is 7:11.
Okay, we're going to re-adjourn. The time is 7:15. Reconvene, whatever. Item 3, Board Business A, discussion and possible action regarding high school health survey. You all have been sent 2 versions of a survey. So last week, after Dr. Rameau, is that how you say her name? I met with her after we had sent her our questions, and she put them in that survey for a few reasons. One, David had said we want to make sure that we're not asking questions that conflict with each other or contradict each other for getting answers. And since she is the expert on surveys, I said, help me with this. Is this, she said, well, tell me what it is you're trying to determine. And I said, well, I think the bottom line is we're trying to ask, do you want health to be mandatory or do you want it to be an elective? And so she and I went through the first survey, and after discussion, she came up with the second survey. And I will tell you that the reason we took out some of these demographic data is because all of this information she has access to based on, because whenever the parent fills out the survey, it's going to be tied to the student ID. And so it has a lot of information, such as they can determine the age, the grade, the gender, race, address, campus, cluster, economic disadvantage, 504, SPED, LEP, migrant status, whether they're GT, at risk, the days they've been enrolled, the days they've been absent, the number of fine arts courses they've taken, the number of sports athletic courses they've taken, the number of foreign language courses they've taken. So she said that by asking those, it really, in her opinion, wasn't necessary to ask these questions because those are data points that we have access to.
I would disagree on 2 points on there. One, if they have multiple kids, which child is it going to be tied to student ID-wise? Because I know there's multiple people who have kids, so that was one question. The other issue is the questions about what are they going to do. If it's an 8th or 9th grade parent, their kid may plan on doing 4 years of fine arts or athletics or whatever it is, that won't show in that data point. So those are valid questions that we do need to ask because we need to understand the totality. This is once again getting their feedback. So I'm concerned because what we agreed to is each trustee ask the questions they want to ask, and we do it. We could talk about taking out the basic demographic, but I went through, based on what we received paper copy, put them in a logical order, in my opinion, state, district, individual, and a little email, because the email blurb was very non-specific in explaining what we're trying to do. And I was going to pass them out because this is all the questions that we have all had that we agreed as a board majority was everyone gets to do 2 questions. There was only one redundant question amongst the 6 of us. But I disagree. I'm not saying she may not make that point, but she can't be forward-looking for 9th, 10th, or 11th grade what they're going to do, or what their plan is. So I think we still need to ask, how many electives do you plan on doing, or fine arts or languages? So that, to me, is a value-added question, because we're trying to see what the parents and their students are planning on doing as well, because the question becomes is the challenges, and so it allows them to think. So some of the data I'm fine.
Let me ask a question. So the point of asking about health, from your standpoint, I just want to make sure I understand, is because there's not time in someone's schedule to do it, and so it's looking at how many fine arts classes or athletics courses?
For some, not for everybody. For everybody has it, but one of the challenges I mentioned last time, any student that does 4 years of a athletics, band, fine art, they will be at 29 credits, and there's only 28 credit hours. So they're already 1 over if you include the half semester health and the half semester elective that goes with it. So they're automatically 1 over in their 4-year high school window, unless they do summer school or some other option. We've seen multiple, well, the most recent email, but I had this conversation, we've had some other conversations, Dr. Micah, this is a challenge for many kids trying to fit everything into their schedule. So once again, we have a board have that option. We would never take the option away, but that allows them to do it because parents are making plans. As that one student email we received, the parent laid out everything they're doing, because they're not only doing sports, they were doing 2 different clubs and all types of stuff, and they had nothing in the summer. So these are value-added questions. We need to know what their 4-year scope looks like, because some kids, it is that. Other kids, it's not, that may not be the case. They may not feel they need it. They have other interest in many of our great electives that we have. So I think it's value-added that we stick to the questions that we all submitted. Because like I said, there's only one over there, and it was back to the main question is, do you think high school health should be optional? The first demographic about what grade they're in, we can take that question out, because if that's automatically covered when the parent does a survey. But I go back to, if you have multiple children that are in those grade range, and there's quite a few that do, we won't know which child it's tied to. So that
I think we will, because we'll have the student ID.
What, are they going to get 2 surveys in? Because that's the question. Remember, we had that question last time. Are they going to get 2 surveys, 1 for each child?
I thought it was 1 parent, 1 email.
Well, it is, but that's
Not per student.
But then that's the point. The point is that they click on my 6th grade daughter versus my 9th grade son.
Yeah, how will we know which link, which the student ID is tied to
We wouldn't have
it?
the answers for both children.
Well, help me, but it was my understanding that the ID was tied to the student.
Right. It is. However, I think what y'all are covering is the fact that if I have 2 children, am I going to get the email twice?
That's the question.
Right. I don't know. I'm sorry. They're not here right now, but hopefully they're listening and can send me a text with the answer, right? Because and honestly, I don't know that answer. If they get 2, or if they're only going to get 1, because if you only get 1, to your point, is how do I know which child I'm answering for, my 9th grader or my 6th grader, right?
Or my 12th grader. Yeah,
So-
and that's the concern, is that we make sure that we know who they're talking, which child they're talking about in reference, because that is going to vary their answers to the question significantly. If they have a 12th grader and a 9th grader, 2 very different possible answer sets for that same family.
One thing I had a concern about over question 1, choice B, it sounds to me like it's very leading. It says, no, the health course should be optional. Please note that the required TEKS curriculum currently taught in health class, and it's underlined here, would have to be incorporated into other elective courses if removed from health class. We're not telling
here's a
them-
hyperlink.
That's a
That's
true
a hyperlink.
statement.
It is a true statement. However, it is, you're not telling them what it is that they are going to, it needs to be more descriptive, because it sounds to me like we're trying to lead them into an answer that we want to keep health as a requirement, because they could, but what are they missing? It's the CPR.
So I think at the very top of the survey is a hyperlink that says what TEKS are, what the health class looks like, what the TEA requirements are. So then it's asking you, do you want it to be mandatory or optional? So if you click on mandatory, then it takes you to a drop down, yes, the health should be mandatory, could you please say why? Then if you click on no or optional, then it takes you to a different drop down, and it says, you know, if you don't, there are some certain requirements that will have to be done in another class. Or then it was the, I don't have enough information to make an informed decision. This is just another suggestion, because I think that in looking at this other, there's a lot of questions, and I think that sometimes in surveys, people get tired and they don't want to go through all those questions. So to be as succinct as possible and to get to the bottom line of what it is you're trying to find out. And perhaps I misunderstood what the bottom line was. I thought it was, do you want health to be mandatory or optional? I thought that was what we were trying to get at.
That is, but what I would like to see is a lot of people, they don't, you know, first of all, when I printed this out, if you're sitting there, you may be doing this on your phone, and this is very small. You miss it. You're looking at the larger words, and you just read it, and then you forget the rest of it. If there could be just a little, you know, maybe a rephrasing of this question, such as, you know, it would involve, you know, that you would need to take your CPR class or in your DFib class, you know, at another time. And we're just gonna have to figure that one out. But, you know, I think it needs to be more descriptive, because I think when you start saying TEKS align and you have this little link, I think people are gonna miss it, because I did.
Okay.
I missed it.
And TEKS isn't a common word language among parents.
Okay.
If you look at this and say TEKS alignment, really the feedback that we've gotten is the parents want to be able to get their children into the courses that are going to make them successful outside of school. And they're struggling to do that in health. In the state of Texas is optional, but what are TEKS? I don't know what that means. And looking at that diagram with the different TEKS and the red and the blue and all of that, as a parent, I would have shut down and said, I'm done with this. You just do what we're gonna have to do, because that's overload. So having questions that are a bit kind of intimidating, this question choice 1B is a little intimidating. As a parent, I would think, oh,
The optional one?
yeah, if I read that, I would say that doesn't make sense. How could I make it optional if that's the case? If they're telling me that my kid's gonna have to do something other than.
Well, and perhaps it's the wording of the question, but I think parents need to know that there are certain things that are required, and right now they're being taught in health. And so if health is optional, your child is still going to have to be given these other things. And I think it's more than just AED and CPR and help me, whoever's the CNI person, but isn't there some cyberbullying something, or I think there's some other requirements, and it's not just CPR and AED.
There's requirements on trafficking.
Okay.
And some other pieces of that.
Mr. Chairman, correct me though, the counselors also go out and give many of these presentations as well, from what I've seen as a parent. So there are ways to cover it quite easily. We could put that in the email intro, but we need to get to the why. These questions don't get to the why a parent is doing this, because they may not know or understand. I think it's important that we do it, because this question that we're looking at, we're talking about one, is in this group of questions. That was one of the questions that was asked by one of the trustees, so it's still in here, but it flows in a logical order of yes, no, understanding it, and then understanding what's in there, And this is 11 questions plus a fill-in, and actually take out the demographic question for the parent guardian, you're down to 10 questions. That's not a long survey, with half of them being yes, no, or a 3-menu option, plus their last thing they can fill in comment-wise. So we need to make sure it's a good survey that provides valuable input for us as a board to reflect on, but also the SHAC ad hoc committee. Because it's to say, yes, it should be mandatory, no, it should be optional. Why? Because it's tough. We're giving them some options, and of course they can add comments at the end, but we need to do this because I don't think many of them truly understand, which is part of the reason I wrote the draft little email that would be the top thing for Dear Parents and Guardians on page 1 that I handed out to y'all, so that they understand it. We could talk about there are certain requirements such as AED and CPR that would have to be covered elsewhere if this is made optional, but so they understand what this is about, because the little thing we got didn't even explain. It just says the board's looking at this regard to high school health, and it, to me as a parent, would be like, okay, so give me a little bit more, which is why I tried to look at it from the parent perspective is what the 5 W's, what is it, why are we doing it, where are we going with this, and go with that. So I'm open for conversations, but we do need to keep these questions, and I don't think our questions are too long, and quite frankly, that is what the board agreed to, is that we would all submit them. We've checked there, like I said, there was one redundancy which is covered. So, and that's
So, okay,
I think this, I appreciate what they did, but I think this is too simplistic and doesn't provide enough fidelity for us to, in the ad hoc community, understand the why behind some of this. And also, as a parent's thinking through, yeah, what is my kid going to do for 4 years? Some will know, some will have no idea on what electives they're going to take or not. But I think it's important that they really think about it. To me, this is not a good survey, personal opinion.
Another thing I noticed too on our main concern, and one of the reasons why I brought this to the board is scheduling conflict, and somehow this ended up as question 3. That actually should be forefront, because that is the main problem. So, but somehow it got to the back of the survey, and I just was wondering how that happened or why. Was there a reason?
which one?
It's scheduling electives and other courses. Does your student's current health course requirement, 0.5 credits, create scheduling difficulty whereby taking the health course requires foregoing an exclusive or elective course that they would prefer to take? And that ended up as question 3.
Where was that in the first survey?
That one, I'm not sure. This was just, this all popped out together when I did the, when I printed everything up today. This all popped out together, so I don't know if it was connected with this, but it was question 3.
Okay, so I think that had to do with,
It's on the ones that I've handed out when I put in order, it's will your student be able to take high school health without taking a course in summer school and without foregoing an elective they want to take, which goes on to that. And then it goes down to, would you still, this is the option question, 6A, 6B, it's page 4 of what I handed out, of all our questions. If high school health was not a graduation requirement, my student would not have taken the class, or would not take it, why? Or if it was not a graduation question, my student would still take it. And then, but before that, it also talks about the scheduling, which goes back to fine arts, sports, athletics, foreign languages, understanding that. But we actually had good questions amongst the 6 of us, and I just put them, like I said, in logical order. Here's the state requirement, here's the district current, how we do it, and then the individual, what would your child do, so it flows logically. And the hyperlinks I thought were fine. Not every parent's going to understand them realistically, because it is the teach and some of that stuff. But
so did y'all do multiple parts to questions? Because it seems like we have a lot more questions than.
It's the same thing that was right here, Mrs. Grow, that we all got. Sorry, my same thing we got here. So, like 6 is an, or what is it? 1, 2, 6 is an A or B. So it's either you would have not taken it or you will take it, and reason why. So it's a and or. And then the other one was just the multi-part one was basically fine arts, foreign language, and sports athletics. So that's just really one thing, but breaking it out, because obviously understanding some of the dynamics of the minimum of 1 requirement of PE athletics, 1 fine arts, foreign language.
That was, so one of y'all made those 3 questions?
Yes. Yes. for understanding, because we need to understand, because now kids trying to do multiple things run out of a number of classes to do stuff, but yes.
Okay.
Well, and having the multiple options makes it quantitative, whereas on the alternate survey, question 2 is a film, just elaborate and provide context, which makes it more difficult to really narrow down to, maybe it's not a health path that we pursue. Maybe there's a way to combine classes in fine arts to enable more free time to take that credit of health. Maybe it's a foreign language path that we can help to consolidate or improve the ability for the graduation plan to include health. And so having that information is quantitative for future as well.
I think it's just value added because it's going to give us some fidelity on some stuff and some perspective, and that understanding the why piece is important because we're going to have to evaluate all the components and understand what are the limitations and then what are the trade-offs to include some of the other requirements that will have to be covered. But it's very informative, and remember, we're going to have our ad hoc committee looking at this stuff as well, understanding it, and just a yes, no, 3 questions, yes, no, I don't think it really kind of gets the why available to them to understand it. What we submitted, the 6 of us, I think really helps provide some, not only quantitative, but very clear, and several of them are yes, no, so they understand, and then the links I believe were a good add, as we discussed previously. But I think the ones that I handed out, which are our questions, I think are fine, and I think in...
So what, and I apologize, it frustrates me to get something at the dais and not have had an opportunity to look at it.
I understand.
Ahead of time. So that's what I'm trying to understand. Are these questions what was on the initial survey?
No, these are the questions that we got, the paper copy that we all submitted.
Okay.
These are our questions, which is what we said, our questions. So I took them, just put them in a logical order to make, like I said, there was one overlap. But
it was these questions.
Yes, it was the questions that we were handed a paper copy of what we all submitted. So this is what that is. These are our questions, which is what we had made the board vote on, is the Board of Trustee questions doing this.
And
I kind of preferred the one that came from our research and planning department, because I really tend to agree that when people are faced with what is this, 5 or 6 pages, something, multiple questions, multiple parts that, yeah, I think they're going to check out. I think we're so over-surveyed everywhere you go these days, whether it's the grocery store or the doctor's office or buying a car or whatever, you get a link to a survey as soon as you leave their door, it seems like. And some of them are just insanely long. I really appreciate these guidelines that came from our research and planning. I think that was really, really helpful with the types of questions, that they should be focused, efficient, and specific, that the instructions should be clear, the questionnaire should be short, appropriateness, avoid technical terms and jargon, and define things specifically. I guess because for me, when there's a hyperlink there, if I don't understand something, I will dig down and see what that's referring to. I kind of thought that part of the reason that we were waiting was to try to combine things or shorten this really long list of things that's compiled. And unlike Shannon, I'm sorry, I don't have time to sit here and read all of this real quick.
Well, it's fine. These are the questions we received a week and a half ago. I just put them in a logical order because, once again, this was the board. That's what the board voted on, was the trustees would submit questions. And the reason I couldn't give it beforehand, because, once again, as Dr. Gibson said, we have to do stuff in a duly called meeting. We're not allowed to go out and talk. This is a board business before us, presentation. And so I got them today when I got the latest link. And so I just sat there this afternoon for about an hour and a half and just put them all in the logical order based on stuff we've had for over a week.
I appreciate you doing that. I do, but like I was trying to say, you say it's a logical order for you, and that's great, and that's wonderful, and it may be. I can't, if we're going to vote on this tonight, I need some I
Well,
can't,
if we
because
don't
we
vote-
need
if
some
we
time
don't-
to look at this.
Okay, but if we don't
We did
vote-
have time to look at what was sent to us today, and that I appreciate.
Well, we have to be
Particularly the backup data that was supplied with it, I thought was very important.
Is this not is this paper not the information, the survey link we were sent on Friday, February 23rd?
No, it only had some of the questions.
I felt that they did a really good job of combining what we had submitted as trustees and distilling it down into, or like the word we heard earlier, crystallizing exactly what we've
That
been.
initial
I'm confused.
survey that she sent, that
Did-
initial one that you all got was the questions, because I gave her this.
I'm confused.
Left out
When
one
did we
question.
vote to have a research company step in? And
research.
okay, but when did we
didn't.
vote? I mean, I thought that as a board corporate, that we were supposed to vote. We voted on, each one of us submitting 2 questions. And then somehow this has turned into, our questions have been negated, and we turned it over, and nobody, voted on that. Nobody said, okay, now we're going to vote on giving it to our own research, which, I mean, I think that should have been made clear that this is what we were going to do. And oh, by the way, they may go ahead and just erase everything that you guys have given. So really, you shouldn't take the time to go ahead and submit these questions. So I'm really confused when this determination was made, because I don't remember that.
They did not erase the questions.
Well,
I went to
essentially, there's
them
only
because-
3. There's only 3 left. So
But
what
Madam
happened?
President, that was an individual trustee taking an action, not the board did not agree to that. The board agreed to all the trustees doing this, survey going out the first week of March, and 8th through 11th grade is what we agreed to and what we have on the floor. And in changing it now, it just seems, it's concerning to me. Our questions are good, they're valid. If a parent chooses not to answer all of them, that is their choice. But that's what we as the board corporate majority agreed
But
to.
I believe part of our discussion was to make sure that the questions were valid and were appropriate and were safe and were following guidelines and following
And-
any safety factors that could involve our children. That was part of our discussion, and that's kind of where I thought that this was coming from, was checking to make sure whether they were legally okay, whether they didn't cross any FERPA guidelines.
Did we
We-
get,
when-
did we
And we
get
did
anything
discuss
from
that
our
previously.
lawyer? Did the lawyer step in? Do we have a synopsis from him or anything showing us that there was some discrepancies
I think
with these?
everybody
That
had
they're
sent their questions and he
unsafe.
looked at it.
Right, but we haven't received any feedback on that as a board, but yet we're receiving feedback from.
We got
this-
information from Mr. Lopez last week about, we discussed whatever the federal statute was.
PPRA.
Yeah,
Right.
PPRA.
And FA legal.
But was there,
That was
That's
the
why we're
only,
not
that was the only
doing
issue
students.
he had. He didn't have an issue with
Right.
any of the
Our
questions.
questions are fine.
And
We're
Personally,
going to miss our
Ms.
deadline.
Grona, I appreciate you going to planning and research and trying to get us some help on this.
So
I
this
think it
is
was
going
very
to
well
have to
done.
go
So
into
thank you.
Qualtrics in order for the survey to go out. We can't send out this little
I
document,
I
as
understand that.
understand.
If the board
So-
authorizes me, I'll go sit with the director of planning and walk through this with him. I'll help him out. I've got the electronic Word document on my iPad. I'll gladly send it right now if we need to, but the simple fact is, we have to do this as a board corporate, and with that, if I did that and went on my own, I would probably be on an agenda item, because we have to follow our board operating procedures.
So I have I went through, these were the questions that we got last week. And I sat down and looked, and so asking, kind of what we started this with is like, what are we really trying to ask here? And so there's 2 things to me, because I think there's some questions that maybe span between these 2 topics. One is, are we trying to get to the understanding is, should health be optional or should it be mandatory? I think that's the
Well,
question we're trying to
I
get
think
to.
ultimately we're trying to determine what factors are considered by the community to determine if a waiver should be an option for students who struggle to meet all
Sure.
the requirements.
So the other part of this, I think there's some questions, and I'll admit I even submitted one of these questions, that some of them talk about more of the effectiveness of the health class, which I guess in my mind is sort of separating whether you can fit it in a schedule versus whether it's an actual class that people are learning things in. And so what I went through and looked, and I think there were maybe more than just a couple of questions that were overlapped. And so I was trying, just now we all were talking, go through, and Mr. Hilliard, your list versus what I had. But I think there, on one hand, there's probably, this thing could almost get down to 5 or 6 questions in the context of the ones that everybody submitted. Not adding new questions or necessarily rephrasing those questions, but just picking between a couple of them. And then there's some of these that are multiple choice that I guess my question coming in tonight was going to be, would we entertain, instead of having part, 3A, 3B, 3C, have one question that would cover those, but then have a drop down for the other, for each 3 of those things. So when we're talking about athletics, fine arts, language, you could ask all that in one question and have 3 drop-down menus that could have the different responses to
Yeah,
that.
perfectly. They can
Because
do that.
because I think when we start asking questions such as whether the parents or guardians know all the major topics of current high school health class covers, to me, I don't know if that's asking, do I know what it covers, or do I know how to teach those things? I mean, I think I think a parent could, or a guardian could read that both ways and say, well, is it asking me that I know what all these topics are and I'm going to have to teach them, or is it I know what all the topics are in the curriculum as the teacher has laid out for my student? And so I think it's that. And then honestly, when you talk about things about, again, this is one of my questions, how effective do you think the health curriculum addresses the important topics that are kind of written in our curriculum? To me, that's, now you're starting to get into the effectiveness of health and not really getting to an answer whether or not this fits in somebody's schedule or whether they, so I think there's some, we're asking a couple of different questions. And I think the data we're going to get back with some of the questions may not necessarily be relevant to the question we're trying to actually ask. And that's my opinion. And so that's why last week when I asked, will some be able to look at this and evaluate this to make sure we're going to get some statistical validity to what we're actually asking? So I don't mind using the questions as people submitted. I just think that there is more overlap than just one question, and I think we could condense some of these questions, still get the same information, but not ask it 3 different times within one question. Just ask one.
I agree with the drop down with the 3 and 1 for the athletics. That's just the way I put it to make it understandable. But that's,
sure.
Yeah, it's easy. 8 and 9 could be put together as well with the.
And so, I think we really just have to make sure we're all on the same page of what we're actually trying to get back from the community. And I know we all agreed to just submit 2 questions, but in my opinion, of the 12 questions here, we can eliminate a couple of them, or sorry, consolidate a couple of them because they're asking the same thing. And I haven't been able to really look through your handout, Mr. Hilliard, because
we can use that and come back. We're just going to delay the process. But now, as we talked with Dr. Micah, it'll probably have to be after spring break, because doing this sort of by the time we get it done at the next board meeting and do that, it's going to be right against spring break. I don't know. The days prior to spring break is the best time to send a survey out to the parents. Once again, we have some time, so it could be done the week after spring break.
Can I offer this, because I'm not really able to effectively tell you all just in words what I wrote on paper and how I think. I have no problems taking my notes that I think might be logical, and it is not rewording anybody's question. I think it's similar to what you did, Mr. Hilliard, to lay them all out, but then maybe take what you did, because I think it's a start, and just send out to everybody what I am seeing as far as trying to better explain what I'm trying to say here tonight.
Could I recommend that instead you send them to our president and let her disperse to us, just to make sure that we're.
That's fine. I just want to make sure.
And Mr. Hilliard, you could do the same. Well, we've got the paper copy now, but
I will send it electronically, email to.
Yeah, because that way that
Send them to Ms. Turner.
I'll send it right now.
And I understand the urgency that we discussed over the last couple of meetings, but I also know that with a lot of moving parts, that if we could get the ad hoc committee moving and have some of those discussions, and that this can get out in a relatively timely manner to still get the feedback before the end of the year like we discussed, I think we're in a position to where we can make an informed, effective decision to see where things go, because we're going to have to get different data points together between the ad hoc committee, between the survey, and whatever else. And I don't want to just send out 12 questions, because I still have some concerns that we will get back information that maybe isn't really useful to us.
Well, and
I think after reading
two
these
perspective on that is when you look at the choices on those questions, it's thought-provoking to help the parent make a decision. And so maybe knee-jerk, I would say my child's not going to take it because I want to do A, B, and C. But then looking at these responses gives me some pause to say, I didn't think about that when making this decision.
Yeah.
And so to me, on these perspectives, it not only helps us quantitate because they're pretty all-inclusive, and others in there just in case there's something that didn't come up as a potential answer, but it gives us the ability to take those responses and quantitate them, and it also provides the parent with some thought points to say, I was leaning down the road of absolutely or no, and now I'm looking at this going, oh, well, and it's kind of an alternative to having the TEKS, which isn't common language that parents understand, and giving you some thinking points as you're answering the survey.
I think even looking over the questions that I submitted after reading the guidelines too, I think I'd kind of like to reword my questions a little bit to make sure that they follow. I'm not an expert survey writer. I would have never thought to, staying focused, efficient, but that the leading questions, making sure, I think the example was, do you always eat breakfast? Yes, no. Well, a couple of I'd like to kind of reword my questions so that it's not that type of a yes, no answer, that there is a definitive response that's not a leading or a dead end for a parent. That there have, you see where I'm going with that? They can understand the question, but the option yes, no, and it's not, there's no maybe or whatever. So I'd kind of like to reword actually what I've written.
So I do have a question on the paper questions, number 11. It says if this course was offered free in summer school or online, would that be of assistance? Is that something we can even propose since it's not a current option and we haven't voted to do anything like that?
Are we legally allowed to do that with district taxpayer funds is my bigger question, I guess, on top of that. I mean, if the board authorized it, that's a different conversation if that was a recommendation, but can we legally do that?
Well, I think that probably, because remember we had a parent saying this is too expensive or something that was just.
Yes, it was too expensive.
It's fair, it's just a question of can we even legally spend taxpayer? That's the question that we need to know. It'd still be good to know because maybe they would do it or find a way to do scholarships or something. If we can't do it legally, but make sure we're in compliance with the law, of course.
Because right now with, finances being the way they are, $150 for a summer school class for a kid is a big stretch.
Oh, I thought you'd said $250.
Well, the $250 online, and it's $150
Okay.
through I believe our schools. That was the numbers I was given.
Okay.
So that's either one is a big stretch for some people.
But if that's something that we can ask, maybe
Well,
it's something.
you can
we
ask
should-
whatever you want, right? But I think the better question is, can we do it?
Right.
And so I think that's really it, right? Could we offer it online? Well, of course.
I think
But-
it is offered online.
But can we offer it free? I don't think it's free right now, correct, Mr. Jarrett? I mean, we don't offer free online classes, correct? See, so that I think would be the piece of, we would have to look at the fiscal note to what that would look like. Because then we'd have to come back, I mean, for us to just say, hey, we're just gonna do this for free, I think I'd need to come to you all and say, is this what you want?
And we create a slippery slope because other people, other subjects, you get a longer story about summer school, but.
I mean, but
fair.
that's what I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
I think we'd have to come back to you and say, all right, well, if, this would be the price tag per class, and is this what you want us to do? And then we'd have to allocate the money to it.
So are you saying that we should eliminate question number 11?
I think that may be necessary. Well, I guess we need to get a good confirmation from Dr. Micah, because obviously no reason to ask a question that's not reasonable unless we think we want to have it as a data point for consideration if it was overwhelming, but I don't know.
We also don't want to mislead.
You don't want to make a
Community.
promise you can't
That's
commit
my
to, which is
concern.
my concern.
We're
I think,
asking.
oh, you said we could do this. Yes, that changes. So I would say, if in doubt, or it's not legal, just to eliminate it.
So what about the demographic questions? Parents, please select the current grade of the student, your child, drop-down choices. If that is data.
That one can go away but that goes back as long as we have that clarity on the student ID if they have multiple kids. If we don't need that, if we know that it's going to go to the parent of the ninth grader versus, that's the only reason that was in there was because of parents with multiple kids, so we knew who they were thinking about. Because I do know multiple people that have multiple kids within that age range.
Right, so if
Yeah.
they had, so you'd have to make a determination, so I have this answer. Either say, we're going to send it to the high school age child in the house, or you send that email twice to that family, one for each child.
And
And we
specify
can,
in the
well, it
survey.
would do it. You're a parent of sixth grade, da-da-da-da.
Okay.
Do.
That's the part tied to student ID then.
Correct, yes, sir.
Could we make the demographic a multiple choice? So 8th and 10th?
I'm not that person. I'm just gonna be honest. I can ask the question. So you want to may I, I'm sorry, I don't have them, so.
Oh, sorry, I didn't make
No, that's
So,
okay.
On the
It's
first
not my
question,
survey.
you have drop-down choices and just make it where you can select multiple choices.
Please select the current grade of the student. Well, I think if we send it per ID, you don't need that question.
Right, but if we're trying to avoid the parent getting 2 surveys.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, you could get a survey and say, please select the current grade of one of your child. I mean, you could
Of your
do that.
students.
Sure. Right. And then you'd have to put in, I think, to say, if you have multiple children in this, pick one.
Well, I think what she's asking, sorry, let me.
Well, 'cause
I
that's-
think
Go
what she's
ahead,
asking,
Debbie.
can you
Pick 2.
pick
Oh.
more than one within the same question?
But it
Yes,
had already,
that's the
somebody had already put that. If you have multiple children, think of one.
I think
and
the
complete
answer to
survey.
that, Ms. Langer, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. I think the answer is yes. I think we can make it select all that apply.
Yeah, because the goal was to keep it to 1 if they had multiple kids, so that they were thinking about a child, whether it was 7th, 8th, whatever. But if we can do multiples, that would just make that easier, because then we know they're responding for, 8th and 10th, or whatever.
I'm
Right.
fairly confident that we can say, check all that apply. So 6th through 12th, you would list, and they would just click whichever.
And maybe I'm underthinking it, but that last question that's open-ended maybe helps capture, if they're going through the whole survey, let's say they have 2 students, they go through the whole surveys and subconsciously are only thinking of one. They get to the end, they realize, oh wait, there's, this other child of mine had another comment about it, and I can just fill that in here.
Yeah, and that's that.
And that's not gonna be foolproof, but
It gives them the opportunity to.
might capture
Yeah,
some.
I think it's reasonable. All right, so is the plan to, I'll send this to Mrs. Turner. Mr. Bauer, you're going to try and translate your thoughts into
I will
paper
send them-
translation?
I'll send them tomorrow.
That's fine.
And honestly, it was the questions that we got last week on paper,
Yeah.
which have generally been transcribed to what you sent today.
Yeah.
And so I'll just kind of use this as my template, because all the comments I had were from these questions specifically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we'll look at that. I'll send them tomorrow, and then Ms. Groner, I'll send them to you.
Here we go.
You can send them to Peggy.
Just send them to Peggy.
Mhm.
I just sent it to Mrs. Turner so
So-
she can forward it back out.
So you are keeping the demographic questions in there? Is that what I'm understanding? Because you want to know, you want them to select all of their students,
Right.
even though that data is available to us? And I am
There-
confused by, on this paper copy
Yep.
that we got the first day, why does it say demographic data 1 and 2 not part of trustee questions?
Because
Who put those
because
there?
I wasn't sure if that was computer-driven data or not, because to me, that, I assumed that was just demographic we're automatically going to have. But that's not getting to the real question. This is just understanding what grade they're in, and when they took the class. It's not, do you want health optional, or do you think it teaches the class the other real stuff we're getting to? That was just to make sure we had good demographic data, does that make sense? Because I wasn't
So
sure
you're
how.
saying those weren't your 2 questions?
No, those were just, I think, my opinion was important that the board.
Even though
yeah.
we, on the back end, have all that data?
Well, that's what I wasn't sure. That's the reason I didn't know. That was, want to make sure that we did have that, because I didn't know exactly what data would or wouldn't come with the surveys because of FERPA data and how much stuff is masked or not. I didn't know. So I want to make sure we didn't lose that in translation, the obvious stuff of, hey, how old is your kid? When did they take the class? But if that's data that's there, then it can go away possibly. If there's a way to capture multiple kids, that can go away as far as the demographics.
Okay.
I have no problem with that. And no problem with the fine art, athletics all being in one with the multiple drop down like you talked about, David.
I don't want it to be confusing with too many drop downs, and, I mean, that's why I had met with the research and planning person to make sure that this could be as succinct and, easy to fill in, and but you know what? If you'll send your stuff to Peggy, and then Peggy, if you'll send that, I guess, to Dr. Rameau, and see if she can put that in a new survey. Okay, anything else on that? Do y'all want it to have information at the top that talks about what the links, what the requirements are and what the health class looks like at a glance? Do you want there to be information about what the health course is so that they can make an informed decision?
Absolutely.
Yes, I think those links are good because it does allow those who want to dig in can look at, they have questions, and it's a good resource. That was a good add.
Okay.
In my opinion.
But
All right.
it needs to be more defined. It's kind of buried
Okay.
because the writing's so small.
Okay. All right, anything else on that? All right, so that's a no action. Item B, discussion and possible action regarding card readers, package B. Is that Dr. Micah or?
Right. Ms. Cronin, this is just, again, this is just our sense of urgency around safety. We have been struggling with one of our vendors to get anything done, so I got very impatient and pushed, and so we went out. This is a vendor who has given us a timeline, I believe, Chief, of 40 days to complete, should you approve this evening. One of the very first campus, should you all approve, will be one of a campus that a parent came and spoke to, that we issued keys. That's actually where it will begin. The current vendor that did 2 campuses, 3, I'm sorry, was extremely slow and very non-responsive to us, which is why we went out and put this out. This is all paid through ESSER dollars.
Okay. Any
Okay?
questions or comments?
So the list of schools, obviously isn't all of our schools. Is that to be done later? We've already done most of them, or?
Say that again, Ms. Landry. I'm sorry, I missed a piece of it.
So the list of schools
Mm-hmm.
clearly isn't all of our schools.
Correct.
So is this replacing faulty equipment in
Adding.
those particular?
No, these are adding card
Okay.
readers.
And then all of our other schools do?
So again, these were priority campuses, so a lot of these are multiple building issues where people can't get in and out, so egress and it is a little bit hampered. So these were through an analysis of looking through, is this as many as we need? No.
Okay.
Do we need to continue to assess? Yes. These are priority campuses right now that we're dealing with.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So the other schools will
They-
likely come up
They,
and-
they might, depend, we'll just, until, again, everything is, it's just like the cameras. We're gonna look at priorities and then we're gonna work our way up until, some campuses, need a little bit more than others, some need fewer than others. Some have more than others, but some have a lot of exterior, like multi-buildings. And so we just kind of keep adding them as we can. So I'm not guaranteeing you that there'll be more, but I'm not saying there won't be either. It'll just, it literally, all of this stuff, as you guys well know, prices keep fluctuating and they hit something and all of a sudden you have something else, right? So we'll just see how it goes. I can tell you we're bringing more cameras. And then we'll see, we have a little bit of extra money here to look at card readers, but these are the real campuses that need them.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the quotes from the vendor convergence for this project?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item 4, adjournment, and the time is 8:04.